All right, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Reading the Receipts. We've got a lot to get through this week. Where we're going to cover all of the kind of happenings in the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni case, going over the legal documents. Um, yeah, so like I said, we got a ton to get through. Hey, Vanda V, hey, Millie Bellis, really glad that you're able to join the live stream live today by doing it on a different time. The reason that I ended up switching the time is just because I really needed a date night this week with my wife and spend time with her. So, yeah, it's been a rough week. So we needed to take that time. Glad we did. Had a lot of fun. That's why we moved it to Sunday. So appreciate you being accommodating. All right, so as always, we're going to get started by getting off with the disclaimer. We're going to look at some legal documents, but I am not a lawyer. I'm certainly not your lawyer, and none of this is legal advice. All of the allegations we're going to cover are just that. They're just allegations. Nothing has been proven in court. Nothing we're going to talk about should be taken as fact. This is all just my opinion provided for entertainment purposes. So yeah, like I said, we're going to cover everything. Today we're going to focus mostly on the Jones versus Abel case. But before we get to that, we're going to jump to the main Lively versus Wayfarer case. So I am just going to kind of do a bit of a recap. So, we're talking about three different cases here, and we're going to touch briefly on all of them today. So just a reminder, Blake Lively is suing Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer and all of those parties. Baldoni is suing Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Leslie Sloan, and New York Times in return. That has been consolidated as the Lively versus Wayfarer case. And then we're also going to be talking about Jones versus Abel. Stephanie Jones is the owner of the publicity firm that Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni were using for their publicity. Jennifer Abel was the publicist, the agent in charge of that account. And as the whole of this process, Jones is suing Abel for breaching her employment contract, trying to steal trade secrets. And so we'll be talking about that mostly today. And then, of course, there is the Jed Wallace versus Lively case that he opened in Texas. And I think, we'll jump to that as well. So the Lively case is where we're starting, and we're going to start out with like the title of today, 3% of a movie. If you've been following me on Threads and Reddit, then you already know where we're going with this. But this article came back up this week. It's the article that Megyn Kelly wrote, or that they wrote for Megyn Kelly, when Brian Friedman appeared on Megyn Kelly's show back in January. He appeared on the show, and he brought with him the voicemail that Justin Baldoni had played when he was sent to the basement. Right. This is the whole. The cast and Blake Lively were going to boycott the premiere if Baldoni attended. Wayfarer insisted that he was going to attend and kind of negotiated this thing where Baldoni would go on the red carpet but would clear the red carpet when everybody else arrived, and that they would do separate screenings. And this is the plan that Wayfarer themselves negotiated and presented to Lively and the rest of the cast in order to get them to show up to the premiere and not boycott it, right? And even knowing that this was going to be the setup, Baldoni kind of played this voicemail that he'd recorded while he was there, talking about how he'd been sent to the basement, right? And so they played that on air on Megyn Kelly's show back in January, and of course they included all these texts here where he was talking back and forth with the editors. But one thing I caught that I hadn't caught originally is that was not the whole voicemail. We're coming through here. Megyn Kelly actually shows the actual recording of the voicemail, and it's here. But they don't play the whole thing. They only play about a minute of it. But there's a transcript of the whole thing. And it's talking out, here where, this night that was supposed to be mine, I was in the basement with the people I love the most, and none of this other stuff matters. And, he's kind of like trying to put a brave face on it. And again, I think now that we know that this was actually Wayfarer's plan, like Blake Lively didn't send him to the basement. That was his plan, and that he was there for an hour, right? While they just had the red carpet and he was cleared. And again, this was the plan they presented to Lively. It makes this even more emotionally manipulative than it was before. But at the beginning of that voicemail, he introduces and talks about, hey, my friends, it's 10 a.m. here in Sweden. And we covered this before when I did the whole first, I think, 4 or 5 part series, when I talked about him wearing the No More pin, right? Right after the premiere, he went to Sweden. He did a surprise visit to a movie theater in Sweden while he was there on August the 8th. So I think this is like August 10th, August 8th. And he wasn't wearing the no more pin then. So this is that time, and he's talking here that he's in Sweden. So this is August 10th, August 11th. And, he's saying, I wanted to let you know I'm grateful to both of you. He's talking to the editors of the film, the two editors that he used. The movie that's been released is 97% our film. And while it's not exactly what we have done, it's very close. There's sequences and sequences that we exactly what we did, cut for cut, take for take. And then there's what Lively did, what she did, put a little bit of her energy on it. As Jamie says, change the color from white that we picked to like an off-white. And then he digs at the replacement score, saying the score is kind of a low-rent version of what we did. It doesn't even really have a theme that stays with the movie. So he's basically admitting here in the first line that their movie, right, for all of the talk that they have that Lively took control of the movie, disrupted his creative vision, that it wasn't his creative vision, and that they talk in the lawsuits a lot about how, his creative vision should have been protected. He didn't get the time in the edit room by himself to kind of create his directorial vision. He's admitting here that the movie that is released, the movie that we all saw, the one that Blake Lively took over the wardrobe for, the editing, the script rewrites, all of this is 97% his creative vision. So all of this, the lawsuit, the $400 million of damages are over 3% of a movie. And I think this is, I brought this up this week because I think this is going to be incredibly damning for him when it does go to trial and court, because how are you going to say that somebody completely took over your movie and shut you out, but you still were managed to express 97% of your creative vision? I also think it underlines here, there's this debate of it was either Justin's vision or it was Lively's vision. And I think, there's this kind of black and white thinking, there's only one of the two. And it also highlights just how much the actual movie was essentially a collaboration between the two of them. And when in the process of making that movie, so much of it was collaboration, it's very difficult now that the end product has been released to separate out who was what and who did what. There isn't necessarily a Justin cut, a Lively cut. Instead, the whole movie is taken from bits they both influenced, and one leans more in one direction than the other. Again, kind of really undermining this idea that Justin was shut out and Blake Lively had her own run to do whatever she wanted, right? And he kind of emphasized this in another interview he gave to People magazine back in January, that same week. And he talks about, if I scroll to find it, I'm going too far, how much he encouraged her vision, right? We've seen the text messages where he talked about having her in, and he wanted all of her and wanted her creative vision in there, right? Justin Baldoni's creative vision always from the beginning included him pulling in Blake Lively and adding her creative vision to his. It was never him or her from the very beginning. He was encouraging her to participate, wanted her involved. And he talks about it here. He says, I'm very grateful to have the level of authorship and involvement. It makes me so much more proud of the film. That Lively had said. Baldoni had said in an interview, there wasn't a part of production that Lively didn't touch and have influence on, and everything she put her hands and her mind to, she made better. He'd always wanted her to contribute and wanted her input. It's only now, after the CRD complaint comes out, that his story is now, well, she interjected, she put herself in there. We didn't want her input, but we were powerless to stop her, even when all of his text messages said that he wanted her. So again, like it's huge that basically his entire lawsuit is over this idea that his movie was stolen from him, yet throughout the entire production, he wanted to encourage her input, and even at the end of it, he says that the movie is 97% his film. It feels very much so much that he wasn't that he wanted her input, he wanted control, and he lost some of that, and that this is what this is all about. But yeah, I missed this originally back in January, but like I said, the article was doing the rounds, and I noticed this time around that yeah, that's pretty rough, right? That you're going to try and claim 400 million damages on a $350 million film that you lost 3% of the control of. Like, the math don't math there. He was crushing on her, says Heidi the Sausage. I again, like, I mean, when you see, and I think we've talked about this a couple of times on various episodes of this, when you see how much he was wanting Lively's input, how much he was really excited about making friendships with Ryan Reynolds, I really do think, like, not necessarily was crushing on her, but he really saw this as an opportunity to launch his star, be a bigger star, and kind of, be one of her dragons. Um, and unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, because once she got onto production and saw what a sham job they were doing, she wasn't somebody who was going to take it and accept it and be quiet about it. And they've been very bitter and upset about it. It's crazy, says Milibus, because either he changed his mind when it went bad for him, or he always disliked her input and was so fake about it. I think, that's it, where you see the text messages very early on with them talking about, oh, she's going to take over this movie, where Justin doesn't seem to have those concerns. Justin is encouraging her input, and it's the other producers who are concerned about the input she's having. It's all very two-faced, 100%. Yes. Alexandra, hi. Hi, glad to have you. I'm glad you're here on this off time for us. All right, so jumping over to the Jed Wallace case over in Texas. Lively had filed her motion to dismiss last week. To April the 18th, Friday. Yeah, Friday. Gosh, it's been a long week. April the 18th was the deadline for Wallace to respond and to oppose her motion to dismiss. And instead of doing that, Jed Wallace instead filed notice that he was going to amend his complaint, and that he's got 21 days to be able to do so. We're going to get into subpoena-gate towards the end of this. Sorry about the second half of this. A lot of people are really excited and saying, oh, he's amending because of subpoena-gate and going to end the code. He's not. This very much is very clearly just a delaying tactic. He's amending so that he can push time out and delay. Jed has done this from the start with, not wanting to be served correctly and chasing all of that. And we covered that last week. This is not indicative of him adding anything major to his case. This is just him kicking it down the road. I would love to be surprised. Again, this is all just my opinion. I don't know what I'm talking about. You are all welcome to tell me in 3 weeks or sooner that he's got some new bombshell that he adds to it. I will be shocked if that happens, and I will hold my hands up and say I was wrong. But I feel like this is just yet another delay tactic from Wallace. All right, so moving on to the Jones versus Abel. So let's recap a little bit, right? So the Jones versus Abel case is essentially that, Stephanie Jones owns JonesWorks, which is the publicity firm that was doing the publicity for both Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni. And their employee, Jennifer Abel, who was assigned to their account and was working with them day to day. And I believe, she's worked with Justin and Wayfarer in particular, running that account, I think, for the last 4 years, I believe. And so Stephanie Jones is kind of suing her because of, her running what she alleges is the smear campaign, and also that, she was trying to take the client away from Jones and start up her own PR firm and take the client, which she had a non-compete clause. And those non-compete clauses are, basically, look, you can go off and go work for another company. You can go off and go set up your own company. You can't do so and then try and take all of our clients with you, right? There's usually some cool off period, 6-12 months, something like that, before you can do that, because of the unfair business advantage you have because of knowing all the contract details, and then you walk out knowing that and you can give them a better deal, essentially. So Jones is suing her for basically breaking that contract. Wayfarer themselves, in their contract with JonesWorks, also have the same kind of non-compete clause that they wouldn't try to steal employees from JonesWorks or work with employees from JonesWorks, as part of their contract. And so she's suing them for the breaches of that. Now, in giving their answers, and I still haven't compiled the same spreadsheet of answers as I did for Blake Lively and Wayfarer, I will get to that because I do think it's important. They have acknowledged most of the text messages, if not all of them. I don't know which ones they haven't acknowledged and said, we deny this. In the same way as in Blake Lively, they pretty much accept every text message apart from the one where they openly discuss HR complaints. They deny that. I think it's important to do that for this case as well, because it looks, for the most part, again, they accept all of the text messages. They admit to, talking about stealing clients from Stephanie Jones. they talk about planting the article and working with the journalist on the negative article about Stephanie Jones, which, while you're an employee of the company, right, your employee agreement will also say that while you're an employee of the company, you can't disparage the company or cause them damages or financial harm, which her working on a defamatory, well, not defamatory, but her working on a negative attack article about her boss is very much in breach of that, right? Or I should say, it looks very much in breach of that. We'll find out in the trial if that ends up being the case. So they've come back and accepted most of this. So I do think it's important that we look at that, and I will try and get to that this week to see, are there any bits of this that they're kind of not willing to admit? So anyway, in part of their answers for both Wayfarer and Abel, they then turned around and offered a countersuit, right? They kind of said, hey, we've got these counterclaims. Now for Wayfarer, it mostly amounts to that Stephanie Jones sharing the text messages was essentially her breaching part of her contract that says she's not allowed to share confidential information about her client with other third parties, right? And that's essentially what they're arguing. For Abel, she's arguing similarly, that she was shared her personal information off her phone, and she wasn't allowed to do that. But also she argues that on her last day when she was terminated, she talks here that she was confronted by a physically imposing security guard, data extraction, and an attorney when she handed over her laptop and her phone, and she's gone on to claim that this was false imprisonment. And again, she's also arguing that she's breached her contract, that Jones has breached her contract with Abel. Okay, so it's all about contracts on this side. So it's going to come down a lot to what is the wording in those contracts, how that wording is interpreted, and all of this kind of stuff. So that is the backdrop for what we're going to talk about right now. Now, Stephanie Jones has then responded by offering motions to dismiss on these countersuits. And so that's what we're going to start to dig into today, right? Is first off is Stephanie Jones responding to Wayfarer's allegations, basically that she produced these text messages, gave them to Blake Lively, and that this was a breach of her contract, and that this damaged Wayfarer and was defamatory and so forth. All right, so the big thing in here is that, where are we? She starts out by saying, look, their counterclaims are devoid of any footing in law in reality, which is a bit of a bun. And that it's a transparent vehicle to vent Wayfarer's anger over the exposure of its co-founder, Justin Baldoni's well-publicized sexual harassment of Blake Lively. Again, kind of reiterating that these are statements of fact. These are not up for discussion. And then Wayfarer's own direct involvement in the retaliatory, vindictive smear campaign that followed. They are very, very certain of their complaints. Irate not at Baldoni's wrongdoing, but that it was widely covered in the press. Wayfarer now seeks to punish those who brought the truth to light. And, again, this is very much what this whole case has felt like, just because there's been the lack of any real evidence or any specificity to a lot of what Wayfarer is claiming. We say that far from a victim, Wayfarer was a principal in a covert, calculated scheme to not only sabotage Lively in the press, but also Jones works from within, colluding with a rogue employee and ultimately jumping ship without justification and refusing to pay Jones works in violation of plain contractual commitments. So part of Jones' argument is that they had a contract until a specific date, that them terminating that contract before that without any going through their process, they've lost out on income, right? And so they're talking about that. They go on to say that Wayfarer's breach of contract counterclaim rests primarily on specious allegations that Jones and Jones Works leaked confidential information in breach of the services agreement between Jones and Wayfarer. This fails on numerous fronts. First, there was no leak. Confidential information, as defined in the agreement, excludes information which is or later becomes public through no wrongful act of the company. This is exactly what occurred here. Information was produced pursuant to a subpoena. Now, we're going to get into subpoena-gate, but this is what kicked off the whole subpoena discussion again. As part of her answers to both Wayfarer and Abel, Jones reiterated what Blake Lively had said from the beginning in her CRD complaint, which I forget where. Oh, there it is, on page 5, where she talks about, hey, look, we obtained the communications in my CRD complaint through a legal process, including a civil subpoena. Jones is reiterating, look, there was a subpoena that I complied with. That's it. This is not a leak of confidential information. Wayfarer willfully avoids this reality to advance its publicity-seeking narrative, but it cannot change the subpoena. So as much as Wayfarer have tried to dispute or argue against this, it doesn't change the facts of this. Second, Wayfarer admits in its counterclaims that the information produced was Abel's private communications, not Wayfarer's confidential information. And I think this is where a lot of we need a lot of legal input, and I don't think people have really kind of come in and spoke about this. I've only seen really, I think like Kat Ortega and more with MJ really talk about the fact that, look, as using a company phone, there's no expectation of privacy, and all of the communications on that phone are owned by the company. I don't know how that impacts, say, if Justin Baldoni sends Jennifer Abel a text, say, about his back injury or about some of his medical history with that. Does that still count? When does it become confidential information on Baldoni's part? And I think that's going to be a huge part of kind of this discussion. And I don't really see a lot of people arguing about it. The only kind of two positions that I see are, if it's on Abel's phone, Jones has a full right to it, and there really isn't any limitation at all on that data, and maybe that is the case. Or, the Baldoni side, which is basically saying that, well, sharing any of the text messages that they sent Abel without their knowledge is somehow something. I don't know. I don't know what it is, and I don't see the legal basis for it, but that's the argument. And I would love to see somebody actually go deep and unpack it. At what point do the messages that are on Abel's phone become, not Jones Works property, right? If an external third party messages that device, are they giving up all privacy by messaging a company phone, right? How do I know that if I text a phone number and I share a bunch of information, that that's going to that company and stuff? I don't know. And I would love to know some of the mechanics around that, because I think that's really where we're starting to get into a lot of that legal stuff that I don't know we know. And maybe this is stuff that we don't know ahead of time, and the shape of it will really come out in the trial. But that's basically what Jones is arguing here, is that, look, I complied with the subpoena. I didn't really have much of a choice. It's a legal process, and so I've not done any wrongdoing. She also goes on to allege, though, that again, this distinction of what confidential information is. She talks here, Wayfarer's false allegations are hopelessly vague as Wayfarer fails to allege what any purported confidential information actually was. This is for good reason. Under no construction could information exposing a vindictive sexual harassment and retaliation conspiracy, primarily orchestrated by Alyssa, Nathan, and Abel, working to bury and destroy Lively, constitute Wayfarer information subject to protection. There's also this question of how much of them working on this scheme could be protected. You can't argue that this is confidential when it's exposing you breaking employment law. So again, I think it's a struggle. And then again, I think Wayfarer is just trying to say that, well, any of our communications are private and confidential. And I don't know the shape of that when it comes to law. I do know that all of the messages on the device, sure, if the company's paying for it, are owned by the company. And that is exactly why you should not do this stuff on your work phone or expect any sense of privacy that somebody's not watching it. Finally, Wayfarer's counterclaims attempt to wield the confidential provision of the services agreement between Jones Works and Wayfarer to suppress disclosures concerning Lively's harassment at the hands of Wayfarer's co-founder, as well as the company's own role in the ensuing retaliation campaign, while punishing Jones and Jones Works for cooperating with a legal process that brought those facts to light. This effort is squarely prohibited by the Federal Speak Out Act, which prohibits the enforcement of pre-dispute non-disclosure clauses in matters involving sexual harassment and retaliation, and accordingly renders the confidentiality clause of the Wayfarer agreement unenforceable. So she's also arguing another piece here, that because this is about a matter of sexual harassment, the protections against it are so broad and so all-encompassing that her the non-disclosure agreement in itself is overridden by this greater law of it's in the greater interest to expose this discussion of sexual harassment and retaliation, and so that is also why Wayfarer's counterclaims are unenforceable. The irony is thick. Wayfarer does not deny the public scrutiny of Baldoni due to his mistreatment of women, the ensuing smear campaign against Lively in the wake of such mistreatment, and the public reporting of the smear campaign in its genesis. It does not take issue with Baldoni's gross mistreatment of Lively. Instead, Wayfarer cries foul that the campaign came to light and seeks to punish and retaliate Jones and Jones Works for compelled disclosures. The effort to chill disclosures, shift blame, and distance itself from its own conduct and its co-founders' blatant harassment is offensive. Wayfarer and Baldoni must be held to account for their acts, and their agreement with Jones Works cannot overcome the law to prevent that. So again, just, really kind of exposing that, look, you can't hide behind the contract. And the other piece about this, and I think we'll get into this, they were already breaking and rendering the contract. And I talked about this, with before about, like, if you're already breaching the contract, how can you then hide behind the same contract to say that it protects you while you're actively breaking the rules of the contract? It's very strange. It's very strange. Okay, so page 15, we kind of go through, they talk about it, the history, they're bringing, Abel on board, they're having their stuff. They talk about, the Daily Mail again, the whole story that we talked about where, the Daily Mail found out that somebody on Baldoni's side had leaked information negative about Lively, and that they blamed it on Jones. This was objectively false. Jones confirmed at the time to Wayfarer's president, Tara Hanks, she never leaked any information about Baldoni or Wayfarer or to the Daily Mail or any other outlet. And again, Wayfarer haven't presented any evidence that they have. The only evidence they have is the conversation with James Vituska, where he talks about Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan, not saying anything to them. We haven't seen anybody saying that it was Stephanie Jones putting out information. All right, so secondhand. Where are we? Going through. So she kind of comes back to explain all of this and talk about this. They're saying that, look, Jones didn't leak any information. Wayfarer pleads nothing concrete to the contrary. To the extent that Wayfarer attempts to suggest that Jones disclosed Abel's text messages to Sloan, this averment is baseless and wholly unsupported by the counterclaims. Wayfarer fails to allege what these text messages contain or how, if they are involved in confidential information relating to Wayfarer. They've just kind of blanketly said it's all confidential without speculating or telling us which pieces are or not. And I don't think their defense is broad enough to give them that kind of protection. They also then talk about all of this is based on multiple layers of speculation. And they call out that Wayfarer don't actually have any concrete evidence, right? Their whole counterclaims come from the fact that at the time that Abel held over her phone, Wayfarer's co-defendant Nathan said that Sloan, who is Blake Lively's publicist, had said that Sloan had seen Abel's messages to Nathan and then said, I've seen the text messages, you're going to be sued. But that by itself doesn't conclusively prove that, Jones leaked it. Now, of course, it seems obvious, right? I don't think there's any denial it could have come from anywhere else. But they point out this, right? This chain of second, third, and fourth-hand statements. So Nathan says that Sloan did this, and they're using that to say that then Jones did that. Like, there's it's suggestive, but they don't show a concrete chain of behavior or pattern or evidence to prove it. And again, like, I don't think it's a particularly strong argument because, of course, where else would she have got the text messages from? But I do think it shows that, like, they're doing this based on a vague feeling and vibes and hoping that they can shake out what the actual details of this are in discovery, which is also true of the Blake Lively conspiracy with the New York Times. They don't have evidence for when or how she started working on the article. They just want to shake that out in discovery. They don't have evidence of Sloan making any defamatory comments about Baldoni. They want to shake that out in discovery. They don't have any evidence of Blake Lively making defamatory comments against Baldoni. They want to shake that out in discovery, so on and so forth, right? It's a common story that we're hearing in a lot of these motions, that there's really just not a lot of evidence on the Wayfarer side. And that's what she calls out. This is pure speculation and not a plausible basis for a legal claim. Essentially, they may be correct, right? But they've got to go better, right? As part of their pleadings, they actually have to be able to plead this with a level of specificity and knowledge, and they don't yet have that. Um, They also don't actually tether the disclosure to the language of the agreement. She talks about that. The agreement's confidentiality provision now is narrowly drawn. It obligates Jones only to use reasonable and diligent efforts to keep confidential information confidential. It doesn't say that they have a duty to always do this, or that it's all encompassing, and that it actually calls out that it may allow disclosure to the extent necessary to fulfill its obligations under this agreement or to its legal representatives, which again, complying with a subpoena would totally be. And again, Jones points out that they don't state that that disclosure fell outside those limits or how or in what way. They don't contend that the information was disclosed not necessary to fulfill Jones' obligations, or that it was shared for a prohibited or illegal purpose, or that it was not already known to third parties. So again, they're just kind of hiding behind this blanket coverage. Also, nor does it allege that any information even qualified as confidential information under the agreement. Again, they haven't kind of shown what's going on. Going down a little further, they then talk about they haven't able to really said in what way it's harmed. And I've had these kind of discussions as well with people in comments, right? That, well, them sharing the text messages is defamation because it's damaging to them. That's not defamation, right? Sharing these text messages of what they actually said, even if it causes them harm, is not defamatory because these are truthful text messages. What that is showing is that they are upset about their behavior being exposed. There is nothing shady, illegal, defamatory, or about sharing those text messages where they are saying, hey, we want to destroy Blake Lively, right? That is their own words, and sharing their own words is not defamatory. And Wayfarer have really kind of struggled to show, well, you sharing our text messages harmed us. Sure, but what's the actual harm? What's the actual either breach of contract, the defamatory, how is it injurious to you for your own communications to be shared? And if it is, isn't that itself a damning confession that your behavior was inappropriate? If simply sharing publicly your behavior is so harmful to you, that in by itself is a confession that perhaps you should not have been doing what you were doing. Okay. Prevent cooperation. How says they look they look messy. You caused Blake harm. They did. They did. Or at least that's what they were planning to do, right? That's the other thing. Even they admit that they were planning to do harm to her, that they had discussed doing harm to her, that they put forward a scenario planning document that was all about doing harm to her. They just stopped short of actually enacting and doing the harm. So, again, if sharing your text message is showing that you were plotting to harm her is damning, and I think it's still covered under sort of the prevention of retaliation for sexual harassment. I think even them planning is damning enough. But they have admitted that, then you're again showing that you did harm, and you're upset that that harm got exposed, not that anybody did any harm to you. They are not able to plead how, when, or any alleged disclosure might have occurred. So again, they're kind of saying, well, it definitely happened, but they don't know any of the bits around it. Again, sort of showing that they're bringing these legal claims more sort of like an emotional reaction rather than based on tangible knowledge and claims that they can actually put forward. All right. Second piece, where was I looking for in here? Prevent cooperation. What am I talking about in here? Oh yes, this is what it does. So Jones says, look, what this is really about here is they want to punish Jones and Jones Works for complying with a legal process and bringing to light the extent of Baldoni's harassment and Wayfarer's role in retaliating against Lively. And that's what we're talking about here, right? This is really, you can't point to anything specifically confidential. You're just saying that all of my text messages are protected, and that by sharing those text messages, they are as themselves defamatory and causing harm. But they're harmful because you were trying to retaliate against a woman for speaking out about sexual harassment, right? That is why it is harmful. It's not harmful because, it paints you in a bad light. It shows that you're being stupid. It's harmful entirely and solely because you were trying to retaliate and attack a woman for speaking out against sexual harassment. And so, yeah, Wayfarer's counterclaims concede that during a period of intense scrutiny, Wayfarer faced press inquiries into Baldoni's behavior, including accusations that he fat-shamed Lively, kissed her too long during a scene, and acted inappropriately. These allegations were at the core of a reputational crisis that Wayfarer tried to suppress. Wayfarer does not deny that Baldoni was facing public scrutiny due to his mistreatment of women, nor does it deny that Baldoni, Wayfarer, Nathan, and Abel's smear campaign against Lively in the wake of such treatment. It does not deny the information that was ultimately reported in the press to that scrutiny, mistreatment, and smear campaign. And this is huge as well. They have not, like in the press, sure, the text messages are doctored, this is all lies, none of this is true. In their answers to both Jones and to Lively, they have admitted that all of those text messages are true and accurate communications. So this is also a huge damning for them, right? Angry not at Baldoni's gross mistreatment of Lively, but instead that it came to light, Wayfarer seeks to punish Jones, and Jones works under the agreement's confidential clause, claiming that Wayfarer's misdeeds and retaliation should not have been disclosed. Hey, we should have been protected and allowed to do our shady behavior in the dark with nobody knowing. So again, really just reiterating that Wayfarer are upset that they are that they are being exposed. I think it's just walk away, dudes. Honestly, the problem, and I think this is the thing of why they did this, is they know that this goes to trial. He's damaged and done, right? So they have to fight this. As much as I do not like their legal strategy, as much as it is very clearly they are filing frivolous lawsuits and wasting everybody's time and causing all this harm, I can see it from the point of he really doesn't have any other option, because he's already looking at, his entire platform of being an advocate for women absolutely being destroyed. The retaliation and harassment that continues against all of the women who support and speak out on behalf of Blake Lively, and the backlash they're getting from Baldoni's fans, have just reiterated what a fraud his entire platform is. The only thing he's got left is to bash, belittle, and destroy Lively into, regretting ever bringing this lawsuit up, or at the very least, making sure that nobody else joins her and speaks up, right? When we think about the fact that there are 3 HR complaints, of showing just what a grueling process this is going to be, not just for Lively, but for the other 2 people who made complaints. And, it's that, that clip of Batman where he's like, pounding on a villain, and the guy's like, hey man, I think he's like, do you want some of this? Like, no. And that's essentially what Baldoni's doing. He's got no other option but to pummel her so hard that nobody else decides that this is the moment to come and speak out, especially when you're looking at the scrutiny, that he would face under the Flores family, and how they still don't have answers, and he refuses to speak to them. He really wants to make sure as much of this is suppressed as possible. I don't agree with it. I think it's disgusting. I don't see how anybody who had a platform that he claimed to have on what he has sleeps at night seeing all of this that's being done. I don't get why this isn't, you issue a press statement saying that this is, not true, and I will see you in court, and you call it a day. His desire to do this, there's no excuse for it, none. And especially given that it's over protecting your reputation, essentially, and destroying so many people's lives over it. But we'll get into that again a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna get me round up. Okay, so the other part is they're claiming that, hey, Jones broke her contract by sharing the confidential information. Jones also points out that, hey, even if that's true, Wayfarer had its own duty under its own, had that contract, had its own duties under there. They can't show how that material breach that Jones did would excuse its own behavior of trying to work with Abel, all the rest of the stuff. And especially given the sequence of events, right? Because the sharing of the information comes when Abel is terminated. And so Jones calls out this, that saying, look, they must perform their contract. Their performance excuse only when the other party has materially breached the agreement. That is, where the agreement breach is so substantial it defeats the object of the parties in making a contract, right? To sufficiently excuse their non-performance, the party must allege specific facts constituting the material breach and the excuse. Wayfarer have not pled a material breach on Jones or Jones Works' behalf, excusing it from performing under the agreement. Wayfarer merely claims it advised Jones that they were terminating the agreement at the end of August and follows with a conclusory allegation that it was justified and excused due to just Jones Works' material breach, right? So they're saying, hey, Jones shared these text messages, and so we immediately terminated our contract because she breached it. The problem that you're saying is, as they say in their own filings, that they did not yet know how far Jones had taken things at the time of termination. So Wayfarer cannot have it both ways. Alleging ignorance of Jones's conduct defeats any claim by Wayfarer that they were aware of, let alone had sufficiently pled breach substantially enough to justify their termination. So Jones is saying, look, they're saying in their own pleadings, right? Wayfarer kind of made this like, oh, we didn't know at the time we terminated the contract just how bad Jones's behavior was, and she was doing so much more that we didn't know about. Jones is turning around and saying, well, if that's the case, then you have no grounds to terminate your agreement because you didn't have a sufficient misconduct on the part of Jones for you to be able to just terminate the contract on the spot. I don't know if it's in here, but somewhere in here, it also talks, oh, here it is. In reality, Wayfarer itself breached the agreement when it claimed to terminate without complying with a notice and curing provision. So again, a lot of times in contracts, right, if there are contention, if there are issue, it requires going to mediation, trying to fix the problems before just ending the contract. And that's exactly what they had with Jones Works. Wayfarer to provide Jones Works with notice of any breach and a 10-day period to cure such breach prior to terminating the agreement. So they're saying, look, even if there was a material breach, even if Jones had done something so egregiously wrong in the contract itself says the process for that is they notify Jones of a breach and that she's given 10 days to cure such breach before they terminate the agreement. Their on-the-spot termination of the agreement is itself a breach of the agreement. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it's pretty rough, and I kind of had this as well of like, how are they going to be able to justify this? And so Jones points out that yeah, they really can't. Wayfarer fails to allege it ever provided Jones Works with any written notice of a breach or afforded Jones Works the contractually mandated 10-day opportunity to cure. And Wayfarer, merely parroting the legal standard for excusing performance is not sufficient for Wayfarer to state a claim or absolve itself of its own breach of the agreement. So, kind of Uno reversing it and saying, actually you guys were the ones that were in. Not only have you not sufficiently shown a breach of the agreement, but by terminating on the spot, you're the ones who are actually in breach of the agreement. It's very difficult. And I think there's a lot of people who talk about like, oh, the lawyers on this side are really good or the lawyers on that side. And it, usually goes along the lines of whichever side you support. This, the way that Jones is bringing up the contractual stuff is really, really good. Like I don't see how you get around it because again, Wayfarer and Abel are both trying to hide behind the protections in the contract that suit them while ignoring the other pieces that don't suit them and destroy their case. And I don't know that that's going to work out so well. Again, not a contract lawyer. I'm sure other contract lawyers can talk about this and, when does certain clauses be enforceable, when do certain ones not? Is the whole thing, is it all or nothing or what? Like, those are interesting conversations. I'd love to see more of them. All right, we got a little bit more and then we're almost done. Fail provided themselves, and then good faith is the same event. Where was... I think it's trying to find where this is. Okay. It's this top bit. I'm going to go to chat first. Millie, so Sophie R says the message... Oh, Sophie R. Hey, Sophie. Good to see you. Yes, you can finally follow live. The messages are bad. Stupid red herring to put the spot on how they got the messages. Yeah, and especially given, as I understand it, in a civil case, it's not a huge deal. It's not like with a criminal case where, it can be, poison fruit and they can toss out all of the evidence that wasn't acquired in an appropriate way. In a civil suit, again, not a lawyer, don't know the full shape of it, but for the most part, even if the text messages weren't necessarily obtained in the most ethical or legal way, it would still be admissible in a civil court if they could have been obtained if they could be obtained in a normal and ethical way. It also, I don't think, doesn't help that Baldoni himself also then put out all of the text messages in his own counterclaims, in his complaint against the New York Times, his timeline. He's using a lot of the same text messages. So him kind of saying, hey, this is all confidential information, I don't know how strong that is when you yourself are putting that confidential information out. Now, there's an argument of, I've had to do that, and kind of I have to declassify this confidential information in order to show context and defend myself, maybe. But I don't know that, like, this is where a law degree would be handy, because I don't know the shape and where those would be. But I don't think it's particularly compelling that you're saying, hey, they shared this information and that's wrong and it's confidential and that should never have been shared and made public, and then turn around and put up a website where you put up 300 pages of those same text messages, right? That to me at least seems to very much undermine your claim. Okay. So the other piece is, I'm trying to remember what this piece is. This was about the good faith, right? New law recognizes an implied duty of good faith in every contract. A breach of that duty is not a separate wrong. It is merely a breach of the underlying contract. I don't think this was it. I'm not sure. Okay, no. This is the double dipping again, right? So Jones is pointing out that Wayfarer's covenant claim is on the same allegations that underpin its breach of contract claim, that Jones Works disclosed confidential information and that Wayfarer substantially performed the agreement or is excused from doing so. These allegations all fall squarely in the scope of the plain language of the agreement, which sets out the confidentiality terms, payment negotiations, scope of services. There is no allegation of conduct that falls outside of the contract, no fact suggesting any bad faith distinct from the alleged breach itself, and no separate duty owed beyond those enshrined in the agreement. I don't remember what my point was for bringing this up. I'm going to be honest. All right, let's just read through this bit and maybe it'll come to my mind. The deficiency runs deeper than just duplication. Wayfarer does not actually ever allege that Jones Works acted in bad faith. Oh, that was it. That they're claiming that Jones acted in bad faith, and they haven't shown any of that. Bad faith in performing an agreement. It alleges only that Jones Works breached it. Wayfarer's sole conclusory allegation that Jones and Jones Works maliciously disclosed information for the specific purposes of harming Wayfarer or Baldoni does not alone support Wayfarer's claim for breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, because, notwithstanding the allegation's dramatic flair, it alleges only a breach of the contract, not some separate conduct that had the effect of destroying or injuring the right of the other party to receive the fruits of the contract. So this is kind of like, again, they're smushing together these claims that Jones Works was acting maliciously, acting in bad faith, but their claim is that she complied with the subpoena to provide the text messages, which would be good faith. They're saying, look, the counterclaims contain no allegations that Jones did anything other than perform the agreement in good faith and reasonably until Wayfarer's clear breach. They point out that, up until the point of them kind of getting her out of the account, that she was constantly trying to help and do so in a good way, and that they haven't really shown that she was being malicious in the way that they claim and why they were shutting her out. Wayfarer wrongly asserts that Jones Works violated the agreement, not that it acted arbitrarily or irrationally in performing it. The counterclaim does not merely duplicate Wayfarer's breach of contract claim, it misstates what the implied covenant even protects. Wayfarer cannot plead two causes of action for one alleged wrong, right? Can't double dip and say I was harmed twice in two different ways by the same thing. They don't give any additional facts, and so it's just duplicative and dismissive. So that's her argument against Wayfarer. Abel's is slightly different, right? Because she's trying to argue again, same thing though, that that they breached her contract, violated her privacy, and then tried to detain her. So it starts out here with Stephanie Jones' response to Jennifer Abel when I believe she resigned on Zoom or whatever, and she kind of calls out that no one senior behaves like this. It's reactionary, dramatic, and immature. Sad. Like, I don't know why you would put that. I mean, like, I do know why you would put it in there, because you want everybody to be amused by it. But yeah. So Jennifer Abel's response here is her response to Jennifer Abel's is a little stronger, I think, than the ones to Wayfair. The Wayfair one's pretty good, but she talked about in her soap opera script masquerading as counterclaims. Gosh, they love these dramatic introductions. Jennifer Abel follows a reactionary, dramatic, and immature, but sadly familiar playbook of filing legally faulty and baseless claims as a vehicle for her self-serving public narrative. Abel's counterclaims are nothing but a masterclass in disassembling and diversion. A nothing is my fault retort that seeks to avoid accountability for her unethical and unlawful actions revealed in Jones' Works complaint. Abel has no response for her duplicitous campaign to ruin Jones's reputation and steal Jones' Works clients, and then include the text message between Nathan and Abel, where Nathan tells Abel, once you are gone, we'll be on accounts together and make really good money and be happy. All right, talking about their whole plan was to steal the clients, work together, make money, and benefit themselves at the expense of Jones' Works. Jennifer's answer to the complaint, counterclaims, and charge remand resorts to hyperbolic fantasy seeking to rewrite history with a series of falsities, attempted character assassinations of Jones, and defamatory accusations about supposed leaks, when in reality there was no leak. The text messages she wrote on a company phone were produced by the company in response to a lawfully delivered subpoena. So once again, talking about that subpoena, which again is what we'll get into once we wrap up here, about subpoena-gate and all of the questions around what was the subpoena, how did they get the text messages, and all the rest of it. What have we got? Millivis says, I worry that if people go along with this side so hard now, even if the trial does show what we're thinking, the cognitive dissonance will be too strong for them to go back and support Blake. Yeah, I mean, we still see that in the other trial that is very related to this one, which I don't want to mention right now, where they're saying, oh, he was cleared of being violent, when that's not the truth at all. He was very, very violent, and still continues to go on and have a career and have a lot of supporters. So yes, I think it's going to be the same, Millie Bellis. But I think we know that he won't necessarily be able to operate in the same field that he was before. I cannot see, especially having any feminist voices lifting him up. Now, does that mean he will still have a masculinity podcast and maybe go down the red pill rabbit hole? Maybe. I mean, there's a market for it, right? Sylvia says, I believe most never supported her anyway, and it's just a few 100,000 people. If Hollywood goes with Blake, these people will disappear and hate someone else. Yeah, no, I mean, these are not true fans. These are just misogynists who've latched onto this as their latest campaign. So, and again, it comes up whenever you debate or talk to them. That kind of very quickly comes up when they'll bring up other tangential arguments, and they're always on the same side of all of these arguments, which are completely counter to the narrative that Baldoni himself presented when he was on his platform and pushing it, right? He was a huge advocate against all of this. And so it's not a surprise to see that these people are deeply rooted in the misogyny that Baldoni was trying to expose and change, but also supporting him, right? So they don't really care about his narrative. They only care about using him as another pedestal to kind of smash down Me Too, to point out that women are lying and that feminism is evil, and all of that. Hello, God, it's me. Sarah says, I'm here. Hey, Sarah, good to see you, Sarah. Happy Easter or 420, whichever one you celebrate. Yeah, or both, right? I did see a funny TikTok that was about, with the price of eggs as they are, decorate Easter potatoes this week. I thought that was amusing. Just putting some ribbon on potatoes. All right, try as you might, Abel cannot distract from the reality that these text messages do not, in fact, reveal Abel's own private and personal information, but instead reveal a vicious campaign to bury and destroy Blake Lively on behalf of Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios, and to go to war with Jones. And that these text messages, she's now been forced to admit in this case that she and Nathan wrote, and they talk about pointing back to her answers. This is where things get very damning, because again, like we said, they've already admitted that yes, these text messages are accurate as part of their answers. Again, though, this raises the question we talked about earlier, right? That private versus corporate distinction. Jones is saying, hey, look, all of these text messages are essentially messages that she was exchanging in conducting business, in conducting her role as a publicist. These are not private conversations about, I'm going to the store and getting eggs. Oh, I got an x-ray. The texts and the conversations that are being exposed are about her role as a publicist and doing publicity for Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. And so these are not private and personal information. Again, where that line is, would love to see more discussion on, but good point out for her. Notwithstanding Abel's hand-waving and false denials of wrongdoing, what is most revealing is what Abel now admits. And I talked about this in the Lively Wayfarer case, right? When we went through the spreadsheet of what they admit to, what is revealing is like how much of that they revealed to. Like I think there was 1 or 2 text messages that they denied, and one of them was the one where they openly say their HR complaints. And the moment that they admit that, yes, that was what we were discussing, and I talk about that, their entire case collapses, and the idea that they didn't know about HR complaints collapses. So they have to deny it. Now, they're going to get a lot of pushback about that, and when we see discovery of what the rest of that chain of conversation looks like, as they were trying to suppress those HR messages, trying to suppress those HR complaints in the news, that's again going to definitely undermine them. Unless, the next text message is like, JK, there were no HR complaints. I don't think it is. And I think if it was, Wayfarer would have already produced it. The fact that they don't even mention anything about that conversation, they're like, oh, look at this conversation, it's out of context. Look at this conversation, it's out of context. What about the one where you actually discuss the HR complaints? Silent. And I think that's the hard part they're going to have as we go through this, right? Anyway, she says, despite trying to distance herself from the Business Insider takedown piece against Joan, Abel now admits that she spoke with Business Insider Katie Warner between July 30th and August 12th. She admits that she went out of her way to ensure the article admitted the positive statement that Baldoni and Wayfarer had previously written in support of Jones. She talked about to Nathan saying, hey, should I reach out and get them to remove the letter that Baldoni had put, had written praising Jones from the article, to say, hey, actually, no, like they don't support her anymore. And this was before they had terminated their contract. This is before the text messages had been shared, showing that they were already, already thinking about and premeditating moving away from and shutting Jones out. She admits that she exchanged messages with Nathan the day before the article was published, boasting with Nathan about the harmful effect it would have. Stephanie, are you aware there's a kill story dropping this week on you, and if you hadn't blown us up, we would not have been in such a bad place? And even admits that Business Insider writer Warren thanked her for helping the hit piece after it was published. Story is up. Thanks again for your help. What I think is interesting, we haven't really talked about this, is what Nathan's really referring to here about if you hadn't blown us up, we would not have been in such of a bad place. And this is on the 14th. Now remember, the whole fiasco where the fake story was planted with the Daily Mail by somebody on Baldoni's team was August the 7th, right? And Jones and Sloan both find out about this through their back channel contacts, both reach out to the Daily Mail, even though Jones was told not to, exposing this whole mess that it looked like Nathan was the one who planted this, and Jones kind of told that to Sony. I think that's what they're specifically referring to. I have not seen anything else in the timeline or anything else that we're talking about of what it is specifically that Nathan and Abel would be like against Jones for. The only other thing is when they were first asking for crisis PR and Jones was so adamant about not hiring Nathan. It could be that. But she says here, if you hadn't have blown us up, to me, that feels like she's saying, hey, blown us up, if you hadn't revealed our plan on August the 7th, if you hadn't ruined it. And, Melissa's whole thing is, she says, like, she's ruined our plan. She's, messing things up. Jones is doing this. I think that's what they're referring to. I don't know what else it could be. It could be something else that we haven't seen yet. But I do think it's interesting that this is, the week after, right? So she's clearly holding on to that grudge. All right, Master Jinx, hello. Hello, hi chat, you're late, no worries, always happy to have you. So, yeah. I have lost off my notes now. I am way off the woods and in my own little little rabbit trails. Which included the reasonable and ordinary explanation. Okay, so, Jones talks about, look, Abel was happy to sign the contract, happy to be elevated to the executive position of partner with Jones Works, and the compensation and benefits and prestige that went along with it. Abel can now not avoid the obligations she agreed to in exchange, right? So if your contract comes in and says, hey, you're getting all of this, but you also have to do these behaviors and these obligations, Jones is saying, look, if she wants one side of the contract, she's got to accept the other side of it. And it includes the reasonable and ordinary obligations to not steal or disclose Jones Works confidential information and not poach Jones Works employees and clients. Uh, Again, these are not wild expectations in your employment contract. This is not, going out of its way to put this undue burden on her. These are basic obligations that you will sign as part of most employment contracts, and especially like with her being, I think this also reveals like that she got a six figure salary. She's a partner. Going with all of that, then yes, the obligation to not disclose confidential information and not poach employees or clients goes hand in hand, and it's fairly enforceable. Damn anti-stealing laws. Yes. Curses. Oh. Lacking any conceivable defense to her brazen violations of the obligations and of her duty, the loyalty to Jones Works, Abel now seeks to argue that those obligations do not bind her, but they do. Having agreed to and benefited and obtain the benefits of her contract with her New York employer under New York law, and after flagrantly breaching it, Abel cannot renege on that agreement because she now sees strategic advantages in doing so. The smorgasbord of torts that Abel alleges fail on their face. Not only does New York not even recognize the privacy-based torts Abel tried to allege, but no court has supported the theory that Abel advances, that she somehow had a legally recognized reasonable expectation of privacy against her employer in communications made on a company phone. I can't, this is so, knowing nothing about corporate law, knowing nothing about law generally, this is so, this is such a difficult hurdle for her to get over. The moment that the company, is paying for your device, is paying for your service, there is no expectation of privacy. None. There is no distinction between these were private messages, these are company messages, I was doing this. Don't. If you ever get a company phone, or if the company ever wants you to install their software on your phone, like I've been in places where, they've wanted, one company I worked basically wanted to be able to put in a remote kill switch on your phone. That if I was going to have access to work email and stuff on my mobile phone, that in doing so, you had to also kind of agree to they could remotely wipe your phone, right? So it did not matter that this was a mix and I had all my private data on there. If I'd agreed to it and put their software on, they could nuke my phone remotely. And this is totally normal and expected. It is why, if you have to, right, have a company phone and you're going to have the company put in those provisions, get a separate phone, 100% every single time, because you have no protection against it. And I'll tell you this, corporate law is always going to beat personal law. If nothing short of, companies have a lot more money and much better lawyers. So trying to fight this as an individual, you will lose every single time. Or maybe I shouldn't say that, right? Maybe you will one day. Maybe somebody will make that argument, but it's not today, and it's not going to be Jennifer Abel. Sorry. Simply put, Abel had no right to privately use her company phone to undermine and hide things from her employee. Yeah, and this is the thing, because the company are paying for it, what you're essentially arguing is that you get to use this corporate device for personal reasons, right? That's the only way you could kind of make this argument of protection, and that's not going to apply because the company is paying for it in whole, right? In sort of the same way that when you want to do a tax, expenses, and you kind of want to deduct your home office or whatever, and well, some part of it was personal, some part of it was private. No, if you're going to do that, it has to be all personal, and you have to, all company, all, the time, and you have to show that, and you could be audited, and if they find personal items in your home office and stuff, it's a mess, right? And so it's just very much easier not even to go into that because of the burden that you have to prove this. And so in the same with this, at the moment that they're paying for the phone, it treated as it's no longer your phone, it's a corporate company phone, you have no privacy. And it's surprising that basically her lawyers, Friedman and the rest of it, aren't telling her this, and they probably are. They're just throwing that Hail Mary of this lawsuit to try. Maybe they can squeak something through. But again, it all just feels like delaying tactics. to then also conduct a secret business for her own benefit against her employer's interest and seek to harm her employer's public reputation and private business interest. And I think this is also like why this makes this so egregious and why Jones, I think, is going after her so hard is the idea of somebody splitting off and setting up their own company, not typically uncommon, happens quite a lot. Again, you'll have those non-competes in there, so you got to kind of navigate around that. But also, it was the fact that she was trying to also steal her clients and also, damage her reputation, right? She didn't just do one thing. She didn't just kind of spin off and start our own PR company and try to launch that PR company while still working for JonesWorks, which again, not, I think, in itself illegal, might breach some aspects of her employment contract, a little unethical, but like, if you can get away with it, right? You want to kind of build up and get some income while you still have a stable job, makes a lot of sense. Again, not legal advice, do not recommend you do that. But that in itself would be one thing, and I think maybe JonesWorks, as much as like Stephanie Jones might be reluctant and sad to see Abel go and set up her own company, might be okay with that, might have let that slide. Now you're stacking on, okay, she also wanted to steal your client from you. And then you're stacking on, she also was helping to write a defamatory article attacking your business and undermining you and telling you how terrible you are. And then on top of that, was also intentionally stealing documents and private confidential business information about your business at the same time. And to me, it's so egregious that Abel would think she could get away with doing that without any repercussions. I don't get that, because this whole case is all because of this, is all because of the hubris of Abel, that she could do this. And again, not doing the smear campaign on a separate private device. Because again, if that had happened, even all of this that JonesWorks is going after Abel for, the taking her client, stealing company information, we wouldn't have known about the smear campaign if all of that stuff was conducted on a separate device. So anyway, it's a lot. Master Jinx said the document she stole and put her logo on is wild. Yeah, just stole one of the company documents, changed, put her RWA logo on it, and got it. And what gets me is there's a number of not big, but like a number of celebrities that are connected to RWA. I don't know how you're not seeing this case go on and your agency being sued in this way and not go, I need a new agent. Like, this is highly unethical. Heidi Sausage says, exactly, 2 phones sucks, but smart and security, change your password every 30 days. Yep, good advice. Hello, God, it's me. Sarah says, do not keep anything personal on company electronics. I only have a work laptop that's used exclusively for work only. 100. Don't have anything on there, or don't look at any websites or do anything that you do not want your employer to have full knowledge of, essentially. Sophie says, people are saying employment lawyers say that they can't look into company phones. This is stupid. It's their property. Yeah, I don't know any actual employment lawyer who would say you can't look into a company phone. No, everything is theirs. Where I think we're having these arguments, and this is what we're getting to subpoena-gate, is can you then turn that company information, is it belong to you or to someone else? Oh God, it's me, Sarah. I think the mix-up is using your personal phone for work, which might have minimal standing if you have a company phone that is not yours. No, that is different, right? Again, and it comes down to who's paying for the phone. If you do some company work on your phone, that's fine. And you'll usually have some sort of electronic communications policy with your company. And that will kind of clearly outline what they do and do not expect, and where their expectations around the company about what they can own on your rights. Like I said, it changes when you start to get deep into it. So again, been at companies where they've had you encrypt your phone, and they do that because again, like then they can get control over wiping your phone. So I just wouldn't mix the two. I would not do it. Use webmail if you have to use anything, and that's it. Otherwise, but this also speaks to like who I am as a manager as well. I'm a huge believer in the work like separation. There is no two. Part of it is some of that because it does help protect the company. Also, anything that goes through a company server, not safe. Yep, exactly that. Anything that accesses a company server, anything that accesses the email server, no. Sophie says, Baldoni's go with it and say it's not okay to look at text. Yeah, I mean, look, they're going to say, the reality is they're going to say whatever helps defend them, right? This is a PR campaign at the end of the day. And PR does not necessarily care about the truth. It does not care about the facts. It cares about the spin. And so, as we'll get into in a little minute, that's really what this whole conversation has been about with the text messages, a huge amount of spin. So let's see if we can start bombing through more of this because we are getting slow. So they go through the factual background. Oh my gosh, we're not even into the arguments yet. Yeah. I need to pick this up. Okay. So again, they come in and, they talk about Abel's allegations that she was doing the employment paperwork, made her disassociate, and a security guard was blocking the exit. This is her false imprisonment. And so she's basically saying that, oh, I didn't know what I was signing and I just felt pressured to do it and all this kind of stuff. The way that it's described, right, where she's called into a meeting room with, I think the chief of staff. Oh, it says here, right here. Yeah, Abel meeting with the chief of staff and legal counsel, handing over her devices and asked to sign a termination form. Totally and normal, and there's nothing untoward about this. She zoomed in way too much. She also talks about that, the security guard was blocking the exit, right? And this is this false imprisonment. Says, look, no one ever prevented her from leaving. No one told her she couldn't leave. She did not ask. No one prevented her from leaving. She did not try. And no one engaged in anything but professional conduct. And Abel does not allege otherwise. Indeed, Abel admits that the security guard was not even present in the meeting room during her termination. Abel admits that she walked into the conference room when no security guard was present, had a brief meeting with office personnel and counsel, signed paperwork, returned her company phone, and left. The security guard is posted outside by the door. And so, again, she didn't try to even leave, or no one asked her. So it's hard to argue that this was false imprisonment if you don't even attempt to leave and are not denied, right? I think in the case they presented or whatever, there was some mention of like the person had asked multiple times to leave and they weren't. I think that might be in the motion to dismiss with Lively. I read that if she didn't try to leave and he didn't threaten her, it's not false imprisonment. 100%. Well, I shouldn't say 100%. Again, not a lawyer, right? But yes, she didn't try to leave and she was not prevented from leaving. As I understand it, then it's not false imprisonment, right? There has to be, hey, I'm just going to leave. And they say, no, you can't leave right now. Or they shut the door, or, you know what I mean? Like, or they block the door. Then it has to be that you have, as far as I could be wrong. There may be other exceptions, right? This is what lawyers do, find those exceptions. Continuing to seek into the proprietary documents that Abel stole, Jones Works reviewed the phone and found the messages revealing Abel spearheading a campaign to retaliate against Lively for allegations of sexual harassment against Baldoni, an instigation of a campaign of destruction and defamation against Jones herself. Abel alleges that Jones Works' review and ultimate revelation of the text messages was unlawful and invaded her privacy, including that Lively's publicist allegedly saw text from Abel's phone and that her personal information was disclosed. Yet this is contradicted by Abel's admission that the texts were contained on a company-owned phone that she voluntarily relinquished on her termination as required, and by the fact that the text messages that have been publicly revealed through these legal filings were produced pursuant to a lawfully executed subpoena. I mean, it seems reasonably tight. I don't think there's a good argument. And the other piece against her is, well, what is the personal information? If you're going to argue that private personal information was revealed, what is it? Crap talking your employees and, again, engaging in a smear campaign, it looks bad. It makes you look bad, but it's not a violation of your privacy rights. You don't have any expectation that you should be able to conduct in that behavior in private, and nor is it actually revealing any privacy information. Boom, where do we go? So I think that was it. I don't really need to repeat that one. Well, I guess, all right, we'll go through and repeat it. So she kind of goes back into here, going through the counterclaims that, look, 21, 22, should her talk, Abel cannot claim her employer looked at work text on a work phone that invaded her privacy. Basically restating this, but I mean, a lot of the titles of these are really snappy and great to kind of summarize everything that's going on. They had a lot of fun with the titles for them. So again, just repeating what we've already talked about, look, it's on a work phone, that she had a reasonable expectation of privacy. isn't it there because it's a company owned phone, so there would not be any. Um, and then also, that there's no, even if there was like a privacy interest in the phone, the Jonesworks acting by providing the text message as part of a subpoena is not egregious or wrong behavior ultimately. 24. So goes on to say, at best, Abel alleges generally that her employer reviewed the contents of the work communication sent on the company phone and disclosed those contents. But those text messages were produced pursuant to a subpoena, and California courts are clear that an employer compliance with a legal subpoena is privileged and cannot constitute invasion of privacy. So again, even if all of this was her complying with the subpoena, would not be an invasion of privacy. It's not this bad. The thrust of Abel's real complaint appears to be not that Jones said anything false about her, but that Jonesworks revealed Abel's own words to the public. Far from portraying her in a false light, the publication of her own text messages in her own words has painted her in the truth. Her privacy counterclaims should be dismissed. And again, this is the same for Wayfarer, right? They can't point to anything that was false that was said. They're just upset that things that came out, and that, that makes me look bad. Abel's distress, if any, arises from her being caught red-handed and does not give rise to tort complaint. She must allege extreme and outrageous conduct or intent to cause or disregard the emotional distress and all the rest of it, and she hasn't raised to that. Sharing those text messages doesn't reach that level. Nor is there any bad conduct or no negligence or breach of duty. Let's skipping ahead to, I love this one. Sitting across a conference table from an attorney to be terminated for misconduct is not false imprisonment. I mean, there's no real need to dig in. I mean, like, she makes the claim clear here. I mean, it's right without actually having asked to leave. Talks about it. Look, sole reference to restraint on her movement is that a physically imposing security guard was outside, never inside of the conference room where the group spoke, and he was allegedly blocking the exit. Abel doesn't allege she was asked to leave. She was told she could not leave, that she attempted to leave, or that anyone stopped her or even touched her. Abel asserts the legal conclusion without any supporting facts that Jonesworks deprived her of freedom of movement by use of physical barrier, force, threats of force, menace, or unreasonable duress, but she doesn't actually say, and also points out the fact that she solicited the meeting in the first place. So, yeah. The claim also fails independently in the second and third elements because Abel had stolen confidential documents, and this imminent threat to the company property justifies Jonesworks' actions, right? As long as Jonesworks' firing of Abel was done in reasonably time and manner, then the false imprisonment claim is legal and should be dismissed. I mean, again, this was a pretty textbook termination. All right, last one is her response to the same claims in Lively's, right? So on the Lively side, Abel answered and then also said, look, as far as I have any liability for damages that I did to Blake Lively, because I was acting as an employee of Jonesworks, I'm not actually liable for any of these damages. Jonesworks is, because Jonesworks in my employer contract says that I will not be liable for any damages that are incurred as me conducting business for Jones, right? That legal liability falls onto the company of Jonesworks because I am acting as their agent. I am enacting what they want. I am doing their things for them. So therefore, they take legal liability for it. And so this is Jonesworks' response to that on the Lively side. So this is flipping over to the Blake Lively case where she's basically saying, look, even if I owe Blake Lively a ton of damages for all of the harm that I did to her, actually Stephanie Jones is the one that needs to pay, or at least Jonesworks, which is a ballsy move, I'm gonna say. I don't think this is gonna work out for her, but I think I'd said at the time when she put this in there that, like, that's bold. That's bold to say, as you are stealing clients, stealing documents on your way out and crapping all over your employer, that they should then also be liable for all of your misconduct. So again, they talk, a lot of the same language as in the other one. Abel went rogue. She pursued her own career advancement by leading an aggressive smear campaign and pinning it on her employer, Jonesworks, while contemporaneously seeking to take down her employer by spearheading a Business Insider hit piece against the company and its CEO, Stephanie Jones, stealing confidential documents, poaching clients, seeking to ruin Jones's decade-built reputation, all before the dust had time to settle. Her duplicitous plan nearly succeeded until Jonesworks caught Abel red-handed executing her treasonous plan, some bold wording in here, by stealing confidential company files on her way out the door. Jonesworks promptly terminated her for theft, disloyalty, and replete contractual violations. Now, having been unmasked as the puppeteer behind this smear campaign and facing lawsuits that seek to hold her accountable for her own actions she intentionally hid from Jonesworks and engaged well outside of the purview of her employment, Abram brazenly seeks indemnification from the employer she betrayed and sought to ruin. Ooh. The hard part about this is, again, Jonesworks comes back with, she admits all of these text messages, right? This is hard to say that she was working in her behalf when, she's talking here with Melissa Nathan and saying, again, oh my gosh, messed that up. There we go. We're going to be, once you're gone, we'll work on accounts together, this whole plot. I mean, this is what, 29th of July. So she'd announced that she was leaving at this point. And they're talking about stealing and clients and going for it. You take this client and never talk to her again, openly discussing stealing a client away from her on August 9th. No? Yeah, August 9th. August 8th, sorry. Sometimes I still get mixed on the whole month day thing. It's been 20 years in this country and I still sometimes month, day, month, which way around is it? Abel admits that while employed at Jonesworks and during the period for which she seeks indemnification, she was boasting to Nathan about her overt hostility to Jonesworks. We are going to war. I feel so alive. She admits that she intended to shake down Jonesworks on her way out. By the way, I'm having my offboarding this morning with our chief of staff, talking about that meeting. Oh no, I guess no, offboarding. This is before. Yeah, this is before. No, this is. Oh, I am right. These are European style dates. This is 9th of August. No, 8th of September. And this is 21st of August. So this is oh my gosh. I didn't realize this. So this is the day that she knows she's been terminated, right? She knows she's been fired 3 days early because she was supposed to leave on the 24th. And knowing that she has been terminated on the 21st and that she's about to go to this meeting, she's bragging about, I'm having my offboarding with the chief of staff, a joke because Steph won't face me. And you should see the list of things I've made to bring up, holding them hostage. It's wild. I did not realize that was that day. I mean, I knew that she posted this. I thought this was beforehand, but so this is on the 21st. She knows she's been terminated, right? And having known that you were terminated, right? When you get that call and you're like, you're done, you already know that they know, right? That's why you got terminated early, because it was 3 days early. You knew they knew something. And she's bragging about it. She's not concerned at all. Oh my gosh. That's wild. Sorry, I'm still processing that. All right, let me just step over to chat for a second. Master says, me sewing, yes. Stealing company documents, backing on the hit piece, poaching clients, me reaping, I was falsely imprisoned. Yes, I keep thinking of the liar scene, right? Objection, it's devastating to my case, right? This seems to be Wayfarer and Abel's whole lawsuits. Hello, God, it's me, Sarah says, soaring off the branch you're sitting on and being surprised when you fall out of the tree. 100%. Marcy Jinx, if true, then Jonesworks gets to choose her attorney and decide her trial strategy. They can, right? I think that's what they can if that's where they're going to. I don't think they're going to accept that, right? Because I don't know necessarily that she wants that legal ownership, and I think she's going to try with this, the motion to dismiss and get it kicked out. But yes, I think that might be the next step. If Jonesworks is in such a terrible position that she has no choice but to accept Abel's counterclaims, then yeah, fire Friedman, you will use our lawyer, and then given that, there's this discussion between Lively, she can also turn around and say, hey, we're going to negotiate with Lively's lawyers and say, here's a settlement, right? We issue a statement apologizing, and there's no financial thing, and that Abel will have to go along with that. And it also might mean then Abel has to cooperate with Lively's team and be a witness for them. So it's not great. It's not great. Enhance, yeah, that was a little mistake. Sophie says, I'd rather have Stephanie and her psychic any day over Baldoni talking to my dead relatives. And he's not, like, that was the other thing that he denied as well in his answers. He denied that he ever had those conversations. So again, I think that's going to be interesting if there were any other witnesses to him, talking about speaking to her Lively's dead father, and that her dead father had told him that he owed her $40, which was an obvious joke, which I still can't get over that, where Lively jokes about, like, oh, you spoke to my dad telling me he owes me $40, and he's like, really? Yeah, because he mentioned I found $40 in my wallet. Well, and like thinks he's being deep, not realizing like that was a joke, bro. That was wild, and that he thought that might be convincing. Yeah, there's a lot there that, like, what? But Baldoni will give you $40. Yeah, exactly. So she was having a laugh about the false imprisonment. But yeah, beforehand. So before the false imprisonment, this horribly traumatic meeting that she was going to, before it, she was joking about how the chief of staff's a joke. I'm going to go in there and make all these demands. This is a laugh. Terminate me. Whatevs. And just, double rods the whole way. Yeah. Incredibly creepy. And he didn't give her the $40, which is really the crime here. Like, that's the real crime here, is that Lively didn't get that $40. Abel admits that in parallel with the actions for which he now seeks indemnification, she and Nathan were encouraging Wayfarer and Baldoni to breach their contracts, again admitting the text messages here, where Nathan is talking about stealing the client, and then Nathan also says that she was whispering in Wayfarer's ear to basically say, you have to go with Jennifer. And she was like, oh my God. He was like, oh my God, of course I'm going with her, right? So Nathan was also pressuring Wayfarer to breach their contract, right? Like, understand, it wasn't a case of like whether they want to go with Jennifer Abel or not. If the moment that Jennifer Abel was spinning off her own company contractually, their obligation to Jones Works was they could not work with her. And by doing so and continuing to work with Jennifer Abel, they were breaching their contract. She admits that she was working with Business Insider. She admits that the reporter then turned around and thanked her for her help with the article when it was up. That's also pretty damaging. Abel admits that she was working at Jones Works supposedly in the interest of then client Baldoni. She was simultaneously trashing him behind his back. I really want to be a fly on the wall for this conversation. I really do. The moment that Baldoni found out that Jennifer Abel, the woman you have worked with daily for the last 4 years, the woman you are paying, right? That you were paying 25 grand a month, if I remember rightly, right? It was 25 grand a month. It was 20 plus 5. It wasn't 15 plus 5. It's either 20 grand or 25 grand. Forget. That you were paying her $20,000 a month to say nice things about you. And still she's like, this guy's pompous. He's gross. Like, he like, calm down. You're not that important. Nobody gives a crap how hard your life is. Like, oh, like how bad's that? Oh, that's rough. Abel also admits that during that time Nathan was not safe from Abel's trash talking. Yeah, that she was crap talking Melissa and Nathan as well. I'd really like to see more details around that, because we know that Abel worked with Nathan beforehand. So what happened, right? Because Abel works with Nathan beforehand in May. I think these are May. I don't think these are April, if I remember rightly, but I might be wrong. It might be April. So in either April or May, she was trash talking Nathan and saying she's terrible. And then just a few months later, in July, she's recommending Wayfarer work with Nathan against Jones's own best wishes. Wow. And I think this is what's exposing with the PR people, is like, they really have no loyalty. It is all about the money. And as long as they can make bank, they don't care what they say to who or who they work with. Definitely one of my favorite details of all this. Yeah. Yeah. Stole 3% for $40. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's what will happen. It was a typo. He didn't mean 400 million. It's a $40 lawsuit for 3% of a movie. Abel admits that when Jones' work finally discovered the subterfuge, self-serving thievery, and duplicity, she bragged about like being able to get around it. And this one's so bad as well. Yeah, pretty much I have my own way around that trap because I have hundreds of different emails for each domain that I own, so she can suck it. This one's so bad because it shows that you know what you're doing is wrong, that you have, the system's been locked down and denied, and you are intentionally subverting it. A large part of law is intent. It's not just your behavior, but it's also can you prove and show the person's intent, right? That they were behaving in a malicious way. This one, like this text message, is so bad for Abel because it shows that like she can't say, oh, I didn't know, or I mistakenly copied these documents. She's literally admitting that like, I know I'm being shut down, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I have ways around it. And that is so damaging to every part of her defense. It's really bad. Yeah, I'd say diabolical, but that and say she had a clever man plan. No, I mean none of this was terribly well thought out because the moment that you are terminated, whether it happened on the 21st or even the 4 days later, she would have to turn over that mobile phone, which would have had everything on it. I don't know how she ever thought she was getting away with this. Oh gosh, we're only on page 11. That can't be right. I guess it is. Oh, never mind. We're on the other one. My notes. We'll get there. All right. So we're going in. She joins Jones Works. We're going through it. Talking about how, against her best wishes, she pushes for Nathan to be hired against Jones Works and Stephanie Jones. They then talk about, Jones was inserting herself into the mix, that, they really didn't want Jones getting involved with the running of Wayfair and Baldoni, and they were trying to push her out. And that, she was helping Heath and Baldoni, and Wayfair told them, to cease all activities on behalf of Wayfair and Baldoni, and instead went with Abel. What was it? 50? Oh my God, I love you. Oh yeah. Talking about, hey, we should steal this client. And then she adds on at the end of like 2 days before termination, Abel wrote, love you, in response to Nathan persuading Wayfair to breach its contract. So they've got, evidence of them really pushing for them to do it, writing the kill story. And so like the big push and point of all of this is she can't really claim that she was working for Jones Works and enacting Jones Works' best plans and working for them while deliberately sidelining Jones, pushing Wayfair to work with Abel over Jones and all the rest of it, right? She's very clearly working in her own self-interest, and so this coverage that she's trying to claim from the contract doesn't work. Jones seeks identification for Jones Works for the smear campaign she carried out in pursuit of her own interests and without Jones Works' knowledge. She cannot. Never mind, wrong bit. Counterclaims in this court. That. Okay. Abel initiated her own loss. Okay, so again, she's trying to argue, like she was trying to argue that, choice of law, and she tried to argue that, like, because of California, and California doesn't allow, I think, non-compete clauses or something, that she, it wouldn't apply, and she, the contract's invalid. They bring up the fact that, Abel's using the same New York court to make her counterclaims, so she cannot avail herself of this forum when it suits her, and then eschew its laws when it does not, in terms of the choice of law clause. And so if the choice of law applies rather than just blanket California because she's in California, then most of the best interest of this is in New York because it's a New York employer, a New York contract, and that says that the contract itself says it's under New York law. So they're trying to say, hey, she can't have it both ways. If she's going to file her countersuit in federal court in New York, then they will use choice of law to decide which state's laws apply to this case. It's confusing, right? Because You got New York as the venue and whether New York is the law that that venue implies. I don't know. We're all going to be lawyers at the end of this, I think. So that's what she's talking about here. The choice of law clause forecloses Abel's California statutory indemnification claim. We do see that whole argument about respondeat superior come up again in this suit. We talked about that a few weeks ago and how that got shut down. She's trying it again, right? Like they're trying it in this piece as well. So in the same way that they tried to claim that Ryan Reynolds was an employee, Leslie Sloan was an employee of Blake Lively, and so she's liable, Lively's liable for Sloan's actions, and that fails. They're trying to do the same here, right? There's a bigger case here for it because, you know, Abel is actually an employee. But again, the conduct where they're acting for their whole personal reason, they're not acting in the purposes of the business, can't be used. And so because Abel here is acting with the goal of benefiting yourself, and in particular benefiting her own PR agency, right, by stealing documents, by stealing clients, and she's doing so against JonesWorks instructions, right? Do not hire Melissa Nathan. Do not recommend Nathan. I need you to go tell Wayfarer that you don't think they should hire Nathan. And she went against that. She now can't say that she's acting in their employment, you know, under her employment of Jones and working for Jones's benefit, because she's not. She's doing it for herself. And they point that out here. They go a little further here, you know, where she's saying, hey, look, they talk about they could make really good money, they could steal the documents, that Abel was coordinating the misconduct for which she seeks indemnification, the smear campaign, blah, blah, blah. So they had on here, this is beyond the pale, and no foreseeable fact finder could ever conclude that Abel was stealing from and defying JonesWorks for JonesWorks' benefit. So how can she say she's covered by the employment contract and working for JonesWorks' benefit and doing for them when what she was actually doing was stealing from them and doing everything counter to what they've been asked? It really just kind of highlights how weak her claim that she's covered by this employment thing is. And like you said, I think as Marcy Jinks said, even if this ends up being true and does get defeated, it does mean then that Stephanie Jones would have the choice of, hey, if I'm going to be liable, I'm going to pay for your representation, and you're going to have to use our lawyer, and you're going to have to go with our legal strategy, which will be to settle, right? They will immediately collapse this and settle with Lively if there is any liability on the part of this. So not a great legal strategy as things go. I think, again, it's just, you know, it was a bad week and Friedman's law firm are throwing whatever they can at the wall to try and get something, and it's mostly just for PR spin. They don't expect any of this to survive in court. So we'll see. Still in Freedom Proceed, you know, the other part of this is, you know, that the employer is only liable in that the sense of they knew what the employer was going to do, if that makes sense. So it's not a broad reaching protection. The employer has to have a reasonable understanding that, you know, if I direct you to do something, you direct that behavior. If I say, you know, go represent Baldoni, and you represent Baldoni by launching a smear campaign, it's not reasonable that I would have known that you were going to do that or inferred from that from the orders I gave you, right? Or from the direction I gave you. So the employer wouldn't be liable for that. And that's what they argue here, right? That JonesWorks could not have foreseen that its senior employee would betray it, so they can't really be liable for it, right? So things like her recommending Nathan, even though JonesWorks explicitly forbid it, talking about shutting Jones out, prompting that Jones would be to cease all activities and that Abel would run the account only, criticizing Jones for not wanting to be sidelined, right, from her own client. And that, you know, in her Facebook post, right, she talked about, yes, we planned scenarios, but we didn't engage in anything that was over the top, right? And so they talked about they planned for going over the top, whatever this means. And so JonesWorks is making the argument that, like, hey, look, even though the actions for which Lively is sued Abel are arguably in the service of public relations, right? Abel's argument, I'm a publicist for Baldoni and I was doing this in the realm of PR. The manner in which she carried them out was an abject departure from JonesWorks' years of business practice and what her wishes were. And so you know, they cannot predict that she would have done this, so they can't be held accountable. As such, she, not John's Works, must bear the liability for the decision. Again, seems fair to me, but I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so we'll see. They also make the argument then that you know, this wasn't a one-off, right? She did this multiple times, and so this is clear, intentional, and that, you know, she harbored a grudge against her employer, telling her she could suck it on the way out the door, and conspiring with Nathan on a kill story against Jones. Abel cannot now seek to make Jones liable for the very grudge she has already inflicted so much harm on the company. Seems pretty tight. So anyway, so that is what kind of came up. But I forgot about the Facebook post that Master Jinx said, what was she doing? I might still have those in here. Bear with me one moment amongst yourselves, because I might still have the Facebook post in here. It was a couple of weeks ago, right? 321, 316? No, I don't think I do still have them in here, I think, unfortunately. Interviews, last one, QA. Yeah, I don't still have the Facebook pictures. She basically put up a huge, ill-advised post to Facebook at the moment that all of this went public to a PR Facebook group, basically saying that, you know, look, I did all of this, but I did so, and my employer knew everything about it, and, you know, we planned for all this stuff, but we didn't do anything that was too over the top, and all of this stuff. And it was very ill-advised. And in fact, what was funny about it is because it was in a Facebook group for other PR professionals, a closed group, they all basically told her, girl, you need to shut up, go get a lawyer. Like, why are you posting this? Don't be doing this. It was quite amusing to see other PR professionals smacking her down so succinctly, because I think she felt that that was going to be a place where maybe she got some validation. But yeah, that she didn't get it. What she got instead was people telling her to lawyer up and to shut up, which is the correct response on what she should have done, rather than going putting this all out on Facebook. Because it, you know, she basically admitted what Wayfarer have also admitted, that they did plan to go after Lively, and, you know, they put all this in place. She didn't really deny any of it. So the only thing she kind of said was, you know, why would a woman support going after a woman making these allegations? And she was like, I can't speak to what Blake Lively's state of mind was, but I know that all of these allegations were false, and that's why we did this. That's going to be really problematic as we get through this, because again, there's been so much evidence of the history of raising these issues, the endless meetings that were held, and again, you know, there's her discussing with Melissa Nathan shutting down the 3 HR complaints. So to turn around and say that you did this because you know, you didn't think these were true allegations, essentially you believed your client was a good person above you know, the allegations of Blake Lively, aren't true, because you were talking about the HR complaints, so you knew that he'd made multiple women on set uncomfortable. And then, of course, you know, we've got these text messages where she's talking about, you know, when he kisses Lively, talking about, you know, it's so cringy, his face. Blake was probably grossed out, yeah, and filed a cease and desist. Can't stand him, he's so pompous. So this idea that, you know, you were standing behind a good man that you'd worked with for 4 years, who you could not believe would be capable of this, is all crap, right? Like, there's your text messages saying that you think he's an arrogant piece of crap who's unaccountable, won't admit when he's wrong, would rather, you know, they talk about, you know, when, I don't think it's here, but the other text message where they talk about, you know, when this movie flops, he's going to blame everyone around him. Like, you're saying he doesn't have accountability, he's arrogant, self-absorbed. Like, these are not sort of good characteristics that you would defend somebody over. You know, not that I think, and I've talked about this before, of just because he's nice to you doesn't mean he's not terrible to somebody else. Anyway, all of that stuff. Let's see. What's else we got in chat? Oh no, I recall that's just such a bad idea. Oh, okay. I did all of that and you missed the huge. I was explaining, you already knew. So Sophie says that was stupid of Abel. Of course it would be leaked. Yeah, yeah. It's Brennan Lee Monaghan. Yes, again. Oh gosh, I need to make that video at some point. is my is my is my client a good man? You know, a perfect man? No, I killed him. Yeah, it's so funny. Is there any step of this whole thing where she didn't do the stupidest thing possible? So many unforced errors. Yeah. But I think what's frightening and terrifying about all of this, right, is without these very, very obvious and blatant errors, we would not have known about this, right? And certainly Blake Lively would not have had proof enough to be able to go after him legally and go and put this case against him. And I think that's what's terrifying. And I think that's a discussion we need to have outside of the Blake Lively Baldoni case. And I would love to have that of just how the internet works, the bullying and harassment that happens, the way that misogyny is used to push these political aims. That I think a lot of people don't realize that the name calling of women on the internet is more than just salty men or, you know, salty misogynists. There is a real political movement under it. And I realize how crazy tinfoil it sounds, but at the same time, every single time one of these creators who's pro Baldoni starts to talk about politics, they are very much in a particular box. Let's put it that way. And without fail. It's a whole ecosystem. Yes. And we keep talking about it. And I realize that it has become so trite and like easily to dismiss. Oh, they're talking about the right-wing pipeline. Oh, the alt-right pipeline. Oh, the alt-right pipeline. Like I cannot like express it enough that even something what a lot of people see as just, you know, celebrity drama, celebrity gossip, oh, it's just fluff. Like, no, even this has now been subverted and is being used as a tool to push people further to that. And not necessarily to push people into alt-right ideology, but at least move that Overton window so that the center point is continually pushed to a more right center. And so it's, until we get smarter about it, it's going to keep happening. Yes. I wrote a post on Reddit and someone commented, I know everyone here just skipped to the end. Why do they reading so much? Yeah. Master Jig says, this hello got his me, Sarah Brennan Lee moves at the SAF up clip. No, it's we're talking about there's a clip, if you look it up, Brennan Lee Mulligan court case, whatever. And it says where, you know, a defendant basically giving away the case in one line or something. And it's this whole big speech from Brennan as he gives, right? Where he's like, you know, you've heard specious arguments and the prosecution can't give you reasonable, well, you know, there's no reason you should convict my client. And he's like, you know, going on and like saying all these things. And he's like, you know, look, my client's made mistakes. You know, is he a perfect man? No. And the other character who's playing the defendant goes, no, I killed him, you know? And so like, it's very much like how this whole Baldoni thing feels, because, you know, they're like admitting to doing all of the behavior as their, you know, their lawyers are trying to desperately say they didn't do any of this, they was fine, they just planned it. And it's like, yeah, we never enacted it. And then you bring up the text message of them saying, hey, should we enact the combat plan? Sure. Hey, should we ask Jamie to get the green light to enact the combat plan? Let's do it. And then you've got, you know, Wayfarer going, hey, so I'm paying 15 grand for this smear campaign, right? And it's going to include proactive fan posting and social media manipulation. I just want to be super clear that I'm giving you a stack of money to have you have fake people post to the internet and smear Blake Lively. Like that, can I just be super clear? Like, at some point, I feel like some of those emails or these text messages, somebody should have said like, are you a cop, right? Like, but they didn't, because like some of these messages are so bad in the way that they are like, hey guys, our super secretive smear campaign, let's just be real clear what we're doing here, right? Like the scenario planning document, right? Like, hey, we're gonna go after her reputation. We're gonna attack her for having a bad reputation on Gossip Girl. We're gonna say she weaponizes feminism. We're gonna have to Ryan Reynolds, and we're gonna have to also go after Taylor Swift. And you're like, Why? And what's wild is they put that document together while having a conversation between Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel saying, hey, we can't put this stuff in a document because could you imagine how bad it would be if someone else got hold of this? And you're like, then why are you putting this in text? Like, the moment you send that text out, maybe rethink, maybe like as you're typing it and you get to the end of that text, go, man, it would be bad if the text message of me saying, hey, it would be bad if all of this was public knowledge. It would be bad if it was public knowledge. So maybe don't send that text message. But no, they sent that text message and also the freaking Word document of, hey, here's our super secret plan. And then like I say, they were doing the emails of like, hey, let's pay 15 grand. I just want to be sure we're paying for proactive fan posting, right? That's what we're paying for. We're paying for people to go on the internet and fake this. Okay, we're all on the same page. Wild nonsense. I will never understand. I will never understand. But I'm glad, again, grateful for this. All right, so let's get into subpoena-gate, right? Because the other thing this week was this whole conversation about the subpoena. So like I said, from the beginning, right, there has been this idea that Blake Lively got hold of the text messages through a legal process, through a civil subpoena. And this has raised a lot of questions about what was the subpoena, how was it issued, how was it work, and all the rest of it. Because at the point that Blake Lively filed this CRD complaint, it was not an actual lawsuit that could issue a subpoena. This was just a request for, can I go sue these people? A request for immediate suing. Now, when you go to the CRD, you can either ask for them to investigate or request for an immediate right to sue letter. And then she got that immediately on December the 20th. And then December 31st, she filed her actual lawsuit against Wayfarer, right? The same day that Wayfarer filed their lawsuit against the New York Times. Massachusetts, if it was written in a movie, it would get tossed for being too unbelievable. As much as this is, look, I talk about this serious topic, right? The harassment, everything that everybody's going through. And it's not just, we'll talk about this later, it's not just public figures who are being harassed, it's private citizens as well who are having their lives upturned and destroyed by Baldoni's whole team of defenders. I do not want to downplay that this is incredibly serious and just disgusting, the whole thing. That said, I will absolutely love so much the Netflix movie out of this. And I really, really hope they have Nice Pool play Justin Baldoni. That would be amazing. And I don't mean Ryan Reynolds, I actually mean Nice Pool playing Justin Baldoni. That would be perfect. Anyway, okay. So this civil subpoena. And so from the beginning, there has always been this discussion about the subpoena, right? So, earlier in March, Brian Friedman, was giving one of his things to the press. Where is it? And he talked about, hey, during the call, they talk about this call, right? The call that Sloan calls Nathan after Abel's phone's turned over and says, I've seen the text messages, you're going to, this is it, you should expect to be sued. Their counter complaint or whatever that they put forward was they talked about it and said, oh, this was in these counter complaints. Sorry, this was in these counter complaints. I forgot to close them and I meant to keep them open. So let's go back to Abel's counter, and I think it was in Wayfarer's counter as well. Abel's answers in Wayfarer's counter. Page 61 is what I'm thinking. Is that what I'm right? Yeah. So in her answers, right, along with her counter complaint, in her answers to this, when she's filing her counterclaims, they actually went so far as to say, hey, they turned over the phone to Lively without a subpoena. And they're doing this based off the call from Sloan, saying that Sloan said, I'd seen the text message, I'm going to sue you. So they're saying, well, she turned the phone over to Lively without a subpoena. They don't know this. They're inferring it from that call. But because Sloan said, I've seen the text message, doesn't necessarily mean at that point that Sloan had seen all of the text messages, or maybe they were just screenshot shared with them, or that those text messages got shared with Lively at that point, right? So they made this whole thing about there was not a subpoena. This got traction and everyone talked about, oh, there was no subpoena, there was no subpoena. And And in her answers, when Stephanie Jones gave her answers in her motion to dismiss, she also made pages on the internet because she issued a statement saying that no, there was a subpoena. So when she put forward her motion to dismiss, not only was it no motion to dismiss, but they also gave a statement to the press in the same way that Friedman was doing. But the press also apparently managed to get hold of the actual subpoena. So first she's talking about here that, you know, there was no leak. The information was pursuant to a subpoena, and quoting from her her filings with it. I believe it was Deadline. I thought Page 6 had it, but Deadline actually got a copy of the subpoena. Deadline has viewed a copy of the subpoena, and it was dated October. Okay, so Lively filed the CRD complaint in December, and so Deadline had said, "Hey, we've seen the subpoena, and it was dated in October, so 2 months before." Yeah, my math's right. That she needed to turn over all related pieces of communication, including email and text. At this point, you know, Friedman had said, "Hey, I haven't seen the subpoena, so I don't know anything about it or where it comes from." The Daily Mail also reported on it and kind of went a little deeper. The Daily Mail also said that they had seen the subpoena as well. They reviewed a purported copy of the subpoena, dated as in October, and that it was from lawyers at Marriott, Phelps, and Phillips, which are the attorneys who are representing Lively in the lawsuits. So it kind of seemed to suggest that this would be the subpoena that Lively had issued. And it also answered the question of who'd issued the subpoena, where does it come from? So the big question about this then became, well, if there was a subpoena, what's the lawsuit that it was attached to? There was a huge amount of discussion about, could you issue a subpoena without a lawsuit? And a lot of legal commentators have pointed out that both California and New York allow you to do pre-litigation subpoenas, and maybe that was the loophole that was done and used to it. The Daily Mail went a little further on a paywalled article, which I can't really show you, but they said that the subpoena had actually been issued October the 1st. Let's go see what we got. Golden Baldoni, yes, that's what you do. When they make a movie, everyone should be played by Ryan Reynolds. Yes, that would be, I would love that. I don't get the need to stress about the subpoena. Subpoena are not what matters, the text were damning to their credibility. So they're doing it to distract from that, right? And again, the reason why the subpoena is important is not because it impacts anything anyway. Even if the subpoena wasn't issued, the texts were just handed over, Jones might be liable for some sort of breach of privacy. Maybe, I don't know. But there wouldn't be any issue with submitting them to the court. There would need to be some other grounds or some reasonable issue with it. And again, with them already being able to subpoena them and come up in discovery anyway, in a civil case, it's not as important as it is in a criminal case. A lot of legal commentators have talked about, like, it wouldn't matter, they wouldn't get dismissed anyway. And they're just hoping for it, because the whole problem on the Baldoni side is those text messages are so damning, and they are admitting to all of the behaviors while they're trying to deny them. So they have to basically try to invalidate them, because otherwise they're done. Even if they get rid of the text messages, though, the testimony from the other witnesses, Angie Giamatti, Jenny Slate, the third person who issued a HR complaint, these would all corroborate everything. Also, the Todd Black, the producer that was brought in, and why he was brought in. Like, so even if they get rid of the text messages, Blake Lively's case is not done, because there are multiple witnesses on set who can corroborate her side of things and what she experienced. So I don't necessarily know that it wins them anything for it, but it is a good distraction for keeping those pages going. Okay, there we go. Messaging says doctrine of inevitable discovery would get them in. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the education. I always feel weird when I'm talking about this and I have people in my chat who know way more than me, and I am sorry if I embarrass any of you with, like, my complete ineptitude and understanding of these cases. Anyway, so there was a lot of conversation about the subpoenas and where they came from. The big thing then was on Thursday of this week, on the 19th. I'm hammering this home because it's going to be important later, so remember this. Thursday, the 19th. An internet creator, one of the so-called mommy sleuths, whose name I will not mention, and chat, please do not put their name in there, I'm not going to talk about them, revealed where this came from. They posted a big whole live, they were you know, hyping this up. I've found the lawsuit. I know where this subpoena comes from. And they revealed where it came from. And it was this this court case here. I'm not a liar, but I saw a liar say that. Counts for me, Master Jason. we're all just repeating what other people smarter than us have said. Um, they showed that it was this lawsuit, Vanzan Inc. against Does 1 to 10. The address is for a plaintiff at 888 7th Avenue in New York. Again, that will come up, but don't worry, you don't need to remember it. And again, you can see it signed by Manet Phelps and Phillips, Samantha J. Katz. Okay. They're basically saying, and I'm not going to go through much of this, but basically this is a company, Vanzan Inc., is essentially saying that as a New York, a company that's registered, a plaintiff that's registered in New York, they are suing unknown defendants. This is what this does is. It's when you want to sue somebody, but you don't know who it is. And in order to protect statute of limitations, you want to put something on the books, create a lawsuit to say, hey, I'm going to do this before the statute of limitations runs out. I don't know who they are. I want to be able to use discovery tools to figure out who they are and then go be able to actually file for charges for them. It's not that uncommon, and it's not the first time we have encountered this. There's a lot of people talking about, well, this Doe thing is unethical and it's this and that. However, Jones's suit against Wayfarer already had Does in it. Part of what Jones is alleging is that somebody had created websites, Steph Jones leaks or something along those lines, that were incredibly defamatory to her, talking about her terrible, you know, behavior and stuff, and that these people had published the websites. Now, Stephanie Jones at this current moment does not know who did those websites, who posted them, who made them. In order to do that, she's going to need to file for discovery information on the web hosts that host them, the register information, who registered the domains, who owns the account that hosts these. Those are the tools which you'll be able to use to find out who published the websites that are posting this defamatory content about her. In order to do that, she's putting that in this claim here to protect it and say, hey, I don't know who these John Does are, but I'm going to push into it. Now, I have been listening to Gavel Gavel, have not finished yet, but they made the point that by filing this alongside the Jennifer Abel and Wayfarer Studios, there is a good chance that they believe the discovery against Abel, Nathan, and Wayfarer might reveal who those Does are. Essentially, they're going off a guess that, hey, we've already got this case against Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan. We think they might be involved. We're going to get discovery off them on those other cases. That might then help us to narrow down the identity of the Joes 1 to 10. Now, they may be wrong. Those Does may be nothing to do with Jennifer Abel, but that's part of why they're being included here, is they made that point of, that is suggestive that Stephanie Jones has a suspicion, perhaps, that somehow Jennifer Abel might be involved. And I think that's a reasonable assumption, right? If you have an employee who's really vengeful, stealing documents, stealing clients, and also there's a website that gets popped up that's coming after you and it's incredibly defamatory, and that employee is also helping with defamatory, not defamatory, but negative, you know, attack pieces on you, seems reasonable that that might be the person who has a grudge against you. So, you know, this is not the first time we've seen Does, right? Those are in here. We'll see whether those eventually do get identified and who made those websites against them. But in the moment, it's put into the case, nothing wrong with it. Now, one interesting thing that I don't know how true this is. This is me doing my Googling, right? One of the things to remember about Stephanie Jones's case is it was originally in the Supreme Court of the state of New York, right? Which is where this one gets filed as well. Generally, what I've read is that federal cases like the Lively Wayfarer one don't typically like Does. They like you to have that information first before you're going to federal court. They're allowed under certain exceptions, but there isn't really, you know, a like for it. However, this has now been moved to Southern District of New York, like Lively's case, because Wayfarer had asked for it. Did I pull down that letter? I guess I forgot to pull down the letter. Wayfarer had asked for the case to be moved pretty early on. There it is, notice of removal. You know, they had asked, hey, move it from the Supreme Court of New York, move it to the Southern District. So typically it's not liked, and that's why you would go file these and go get the information first before bringing your federal case. So just a point. I don't know how true that is, just something I read up. Something to keep in mind. All right. So yes, so they found this court case, and they're saying, hey, this is the case that's for it. There's nothing in here that really identifies whether it's Blake Lively or not, and so that set everybody digging for information about the company, right? For Vanzan, and this is where we start to go down a rabbit trail. Bear with me, it's complicated. If you have questions, ask them in chat as we go along so that I can go, slowly or break it down. So where this starts is there is a Vanzan Incorporated that is registered in California that is a subsidiary of a Delaware company. I know, we're already starting pretty deep. Now, the Delaware version of this company, and bear in mind, I'm going to be redacting some of this information. It is public information. It's just what I'm comfortable with showing you, and I'm redacting. I don't think any of this is private information because it's on public websites. I just didn't feel right about some of this, and I'll get into why in a minute. But the original Vanzan is registered in Delaware in 2008. Wait, I need a mug of cocoa. Yeah, no, you pull up a stiff drink. I mean, I could probably do with a little sip, but the original Vanzan Incorporated is registered in Delaware. Now, the important thing to know here is I kept the phone number in. Oh well. I think that's just the registered information, registered agent. But the important thing to know is this is registered to a private citizen. They are not connected to any of this case or Blake Lively. I want to really reiterate this. Vanzan Incorporated here in Delaware in 2008 has nothing to do with them, at least from what I can see. There is then in 2010 a California subsidiary or branch that is opened in California based off the original Delaware company. I want to just check this before I show you. Yes, okay, we're good. So this is the incorporation document for the California Vanzan. All right. The CEO is, like I said, a private citizen, Eric Rothschild. They register it 2010. So this is also a private citizen who registers this in California in 2010. Okay. What happens is that in 2013, it gets marked as FTB forfeited. Okay, so what does that mean? That is when the company gets forfeited for failure to pay taxes, essentially. But you also see, then all of a sudden, in 2021 and 2023, there are some new filings for it. And so these are like the updated information for that particular company. So in 2021, the California Secretary of State updates the information for that company. And the mailing address is the same address that is in the lawsuit, right? Vanzan Incorporated, the mailing address, and the officer is a Blake Reynolds. This is now bringing about, well, this is the connection to Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds. This is the connection between Vanzan and the lawsuit and the subpoena, right? And they kind of say in 2021, yes, it's registered to this address. And the agent for service of process is a gentleman called Eric Binder. Okay, that'll come up. That information gets updated again in 2023, and we can see again in 2023, it says it's Vanzan. It was originally incorporated in Delaware, has these principal addresses and Eric Binder, and it's signed here supposedly by Blake Reynolds on 2023, right? So this is sort of like the smoking gun, the proof that Vanzan Incorporated is owned by Blake and Ryan, and that they were behind that lawsuit. Go back to my notes. Okay. There is, however, another Vanzan. There's also a Vanzan in New York. The Vanzan in New York was filed in 2019. So one of the big questions about this, right, about the 2010 California Vanzan that appears to be linked to Blake Lively is, when did this change hands, right? It was registered originally in 2010 to a different person. At some point in 2021, it's now registered this to Blake Reynolds. When did it change hands? Because I think Blake and Ryan met in 2010. I think Ryan was still going through his separation with his wife. His name I've forgotten. You all will tell me in chat. But yeah, he was still going through a separation, so he hadn't really, had a relationship with Blake Lively at this point. Vanzan is a name that comes from, their two hometowns. Ryan's from, what's it? Scarlett Johansson. Thank you. Yes. So yes, Vanzan is the incorporation of their two hometowns together. So it clearly seems related to them, but obviously it was not originally, and it's not the Delaware version either, because, well, where's the Delaware one? Did I close it? I guess I closed the Delaware one. Bring back that Delaware one. And it's not the Delaware one because this was before they ever met, right? So what happens is it looks like somebody else had registered a company by the same name at some point, and somehow this ends up getting tied to the one that Blake and Ryan own. We don't necessarily know. One of the things I would caution you is, I don't necessarily know that this information on here is accurate and true. I've seen a couple of people talk about the real kind of point of record for this stuff is Westlaw, which, do not have access to. And a lot of the public information on this can get confused. But anyway, at some point, there is a company in 2021 that is tied to Blake and Ryan at this address called Vanzan. I think, right, given that there's this New York version of the company that's registered in 2019, I think it just gets falsely attached on the California side, is what I think. I don't think it's actually anything to do with the California business. I don't think it's anything connected to it. I just think that for some reason the California Secretary of State attaches those two just because there's an active entity called Vanzan Incorporated over there in New York. Yeah, thank you. Vancouver and what was it? Tanzania. Those are the two hometowns. So I think that's what happened. And anyway, the New York Vanzan is registered to ML Management Associates as their entity. And ML Management Associates is a management company who are registered at the address that we saw before, 888 7th Avenue, 4th floor. People are taking this as being a Blake and Ryan address. And so anything attached to this address is somehow Blake and Ryan, not ML Management Partners. And that's an issue because ML Management, what they do is business management. So it would make sense that there are a number of businesses that are tied to this address because that's what they do, right? They are business managers. And you can see here's Eric Binder, who's one of the partners. I say that because there are other companies that are registered to this address. I believe I blanked this out, but let me just make sure I did correctly. Didn't make any mistakes. Okay. So I pulled a different company just to kind of show. This is another company that is registered for ML Management at that same address. It's also registered at Eric Binder. It is not associated at any way, shape, or form to Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds. I say this because there's a lot of people talking about this as like proof now anything with this address is Blake and Ryan, when really it's connected to ML Management. They're all just using the same business management company to manage their businesses. In particular, I saw that, Liz Plank, who hosted the Man Enough podcast with Justin Baldoni, has a company under her name, Liz Plank Productions. It was registered in 2017. So, back then, it's also registered to ML Management at that same address. This is being used as proof that Liz Plank is connected to Blake and Ryan, and that, she always planned to throw Baldoni in the bus, and that she only jumped on the podcast in order to, be a spy for Blake and Ryan. It is crazy how wild we're getting with like the speculation and conspiracy theories about this when the answer is incredibly simple. They're just using the same management company at the same address. I saw people on Reddit saying Liz Plank is registered at Ryan Reynolds' address. Yes, this is what it, right? This is exactly that what I was just talking about. They're using ML management to say that now this is Ryan's address, and anybody attached to a management company which has, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of businesses registered under its address, are attached to all of this. It's wild. Now, so this brings up that, look, that's what I think has happened. There's a lot of speculation that it's tied to the California, and that somehow this is shady or illegal because, because the California business was forfeited in 2013. It was never reopened. And so continuing to use this as the California business is shady on their part, blah, 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 blah. The problem with that is in the actual lawsuit itself, they talk about their businesses are incorporated in New York, that the plaintiff is a New York plaintiff who, is in New York. None of this would be the case if the Vanzan in this act is a California company. It doesn't matter that the address is there. It wouldn't be incorporated in New York. It would be a business that is incorporated in California, and that's not the case. So that's what leads me to suspect that I don't trust this California entry, that those two the business tied. Either way, it does not make a difference. They filed this lawsuit, and it looks like they filed this in September the 27th, and then they dropped the lawsuit without prejudice on December the 19th, which is the day before the CRD complaint gets launched, right? So right before it, they dismiss it and say, hey, no, we're good. We take it down. A lot of people are talking about how this is really shady, and this shows they filed this as a sham lawsuit. No, this is completely fine. What they were using this lawsuit for was to get that subpoena to identify their does. They did get that identity from the subpoena, and then close this down to actually go file a correct lawsuit against them. Now, the question becomes, why didn't they just amend this lawsuit to then say, hey, we know who the does are. Let's file this lawsuit instead of. And I think the answer is because I don't believe they knew at the time of originally filing this that the defamation stuff and the smear campaign were directly tied to the sexual harassment allegations. They might have suspected it, and going to Stephanie Jones and issuing that subpoena for those text messages, I think they knew at some point something was going on, right? Remember that Blake and Ryan had issued an apology that they wanted Wayfarer to issue in August. They knew that something was going on, that something was being manufactured. They just didn't have the proof of it. They wanted them to apologize for it. Wayfarer blew them off. They then go this route of filing the lawsuit to get the information as to what is going on. Those text messages revealed that not only were they engaging in this smear campaign, which would allow them to go after them legally for that, but it also was directly connected to the sexual harassment allegations, which dramatically changes things. Because the main issues in the CRD complaint were not necessarily the were not essentially the smear campaign. There were a bunch of employment law about sexual harassment, failure to investigate, and retaliation for sexual harassment. It makes the smear campaign much stronger when it's in connection to the sexual harassment. And I think getting those text messages, they learn that. And so then, because this becomes now employment law, then the CRD complaint comes up because she's going after a California employer. So now we have to go through the legal process of filing the complaint with the CRD to get the right to sue, to then do the suit. And so I think that is what was going on here. Yeah. Moy Mimi says, I love a good long game. That's what this was. This was a long game. It's all done through the legal process. Despite that, a bunch of people have been commenting and talking about how this is whole shady and all the rest of it. And in particular, the Daily Mail posted this article talking about it was super shady because they ran off. They posted this on Thursday as well, on Thursday. And they had talked to a bunch of lawyers. They talked to Friedman, right? This appears to be an skirt around the process to be able to get those secret documents. that would be an abusive process, and we intend to take all action allowable under the law, which, spoiler alert, is absolutely none. But this is why when Wallace filed for his amendment on Friday, everybody was very excited that, oh, this is going to be added to Wallace's lawsuit in Texas, and that Friedman's going to be getting this in there. First off, Friedman doesn't represent Wallace in the Texas case, so Friedman isn't going to be telling Wallace anything about that. And if he is, that's a problem, because he's already got legal representation. And if it's not Friedman, he can't be helping and chipping in and putting in all of that stuff with their lawyers. He has already got his own legal representation, and part of the fight they've been having is whether Friedman is actually representing Wallace or not. So he needs to decide if he's representing Wallace or not. Anyway, they talk about this. Lively's lawyers also issued a statement, accused Friedman of faux outrage. They participated and may continue to participate in. They talk about the lawsuit, that they've been harming her, all the rest of the stuff. I think Ezra Hudson's got a quote in here, right? Oh yes, I forgot to talk about that piece. But anyway, the other piece they do is they talk to a bunch of lawyers. This is interesting. So in particular, they talk to the two lawyers of the Ask Two Lawyers podcast, saying that it didn't make sense to them. They talked to Peter Gleason, who says this looks like a ruse to inject legitimacy into obtaining discovery that's intended to be used in the cause of action. It's highly inappropriate. It's super shady. It's clandestine. All of this stuff. So they really kind of brought this up, and then I think they've got the statement down here from Lively's attorney Ezra Hudson talking about though lawsuits are totally common. And like I said, we've already seen it as part of Stephanie Jones' suit. So this outrage over Doe's was nowhere, back in, I think, was it December that Jones had filed hers? Suddenly now it's an issue. This lawsuit unearthed the Wayfarers' documented plan in their own words and their own text message to destroy Blake Lively. Their faux outrage has nothing to do with legal ethics of the law, which are not an issue, and it's entirely about the fact they got caught doing something they insisted would be untraceable. I forgot one other piece. The other entry for the other information about Vanzan, the New York Vanzan, is that there are two records for importing shipments that are related to it. Actually, you know what? We'll come back to that. We'll come back to the shipments. Hold that thought for a second. We'll wrap up with the shipments. Anyway, so this was all done on Thursday, right? They put out this article. Sorry for squirreling all over the place. Trusted, beloved news outlet, the Daily Mail. Hey, we go where we can, right? We gotta post what we can. They talked to these lawyers and everything and posted this article on Thursday. Thursday was the same day that the internet creator who kind of preempted this Daily Mail article also came out with the same information, right? So everybody came out with the same information on Thursday. What's interesting is the two lawyers from the Ask Two Lawyers podcast talked about it on a stream that they did, where they had said that they, couldn't talk about it until the article came out, but the Daily Mail had called them on Wednesday morning. Now, I talked before, it seems fairly simple to me that the Daily Mail would have found the lawsuit, right? The Daily Mail had already posted the previous article when Stephanie Jones issued her motions to dismiss that they had seen the subpoena, right? So they'd seen the subpoena and they knew what date it was, October the 1st. They knew that it was from Lively's lawyers, and they knew that the company on the name of the subpoena was Vanzan Inc. So it seems reasonable that, they knew on April the 10th that in the ensuing 8 days, they'd found the company and the details of it. This seems a straight line, right? And they found this on Thursday. The internet creator, who just also happened to find it on Thursday, it starts to put question on whether they did just find it, right? Because we knew that the Daily Mail have had the subpoena for a week. They had all of the information. And so them revealing it on Thursday, they had information ahead of time. A lot of the Baldoni side are suggesting that the internet creator came up with it first and the Daily Mail was just coasting off their investigation. The Daily Mail says no. We did our own investigation, and the fact that they talked to the Ask Two lawyers on Wednesday shows that they were already ahead of the internet creator. To me, the question is, how did the internet creator find that information? It seems suggestive to me that either There's somebody at the Daily Mail who's talking to them, or somebody, maybe one of the lawyers that were interviewed on the Daily Mail. And I do have the Ask Two lawyers up here right now. Let me be very clear. I'm not suggesting either of them are it, but somebody that the Daily Mail had talked to in getting background for that piece could have also talked to that internet creator. I think it's very concerning that essentially what we've got is, this hub of pro Baldoni content of these people who are essentially all collaborating and putting this information together. And not only that, they're not being open and disclosing those connections. That internet creator has repeatedly said that they found this information by themselves, that they came up with it, all of this stuff. I think that's a very hard ask to believe, that the Daily Mail, who had the subpoena, right, who came out with that information on Thursday, and were interviewing people beforehand and that article had come out, that this internet creator had also come up with this by themselves. It seems to me very suggestive that somebody is leaking and feeding information to them. I don't necessarily think it's somebody at the Daily Mail. I think it is more likely to be somebody the Daily Mail talked to about that. And so that those links are not being disclosed, to me, is concerning, because we're talking about a smear campaign. You don't know who you can trust, who is actually doing this off their own back, who is being pushed to, who's being encouraged, who's being drip fed these tips and stories to continue to promote like this narrative that a perfectly normal, legal and valid approach to getting information and getting discovery in a case where you don't know the identity of your defendants is super shady, right? So I think a lot of questions need to be asked. We're not asking them, but I think we're starting to see bits of the pieces of this all being revealed, and they need to be very careful, because if that is the case, they could end up finding themselves being dragged into a lawsuit, or at least being compelled to offer discovery as to how much they knew, who was feeding them, and all the rest of the stuff. I think it's funny to me, because I cannot tell you how many times I'm accused of being in collaboration with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, are in taking money from them, and I can assure you that nobody has ever reached out and contacted me or asked me to make any content on any side. And I jokingly said, like, the first time somebody comes to me and offers me money, I'm going to TMZ and we're making bank. Yeah, Lyman would not be none too pleased. No, absolutely, right? I mean, this is showing that not only is that collusion continuing to happen, but if there is any way, shape, or form in which Baldoni's team are involved, when we talk about how they got that subpoena in the first place, did Jones leak the subpoena and want to clear up that, hey, no, I did have a valid and legal subpoena served to me, and showed the Daily Mail that, or was it by Baldoni's side? If it's by Baldoni's side, you have a very, very problematic issue of Baldoni's side are feeding the information to the press and to creators in order to stoke this content, even as they're publicly denying that they're involved in doing that exact behavior. And I think if you're a creator, as much as it really might be nice to get that attention, and if you are being paid, great for you, just be careful, because there's a legal liability there that could open you to being dragged into this. And this is also why, if anybody did reach out to me, I would not touch this with a barge pole, because I don't want that, please, thank you. I would tell everyone I was paid off, but I wouldn't tell everyone I was paid off. There would be signs. Yeah. So anyway, after all the lawyers who were looking for it missed it. Yeah, and I think that's the other issue with that timing, right? People have been talking about the subpoena since the original complaints were issued in December, right? So that's why it makes this sauce the same day. It's I am a big believer in the fact that sometimes we look at coincidence and read too much into it. I think this might be one of the times where I think it's worth just raising a little flag of like, make a note of it, see if that happens again. Anyway, to get back onto where I go and to kind of land this plane, wrap this up, right? In digging for the company, not only are we like going after Liz Plank now, claiming that she's, registered at the same address as Ryan Reynolds, and she must have worked with them, and that her entire participation on the Man Enough podcast was, as a sleeper agent to expose Baldoni. the other record for Vanzan Inc. is two import shipments that they brought in. And this import shipment, and I'm blurring out the name here, is to an executive assistant who, again, just a random person, a person. And I have seen this week, not only are we going after that, but now we're going after that person. They were looking for their private information, posting about their LinkedIn, going after them. And so now, like, the hate campaign and the smear campaign is broadening, right? It's not just Blake Lively, right? It's not just what has happened to, Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, Jenny Slate. We're now broadening this to go after private individuals. Now, you'll notice that this person works at Vision PR, right? Which is the PR company that is used by Blake Lively. It seems perfectly fine and normal that, yeah, as Blake Lively might have imported something for that executive assistant, bought them a gift, something nice, they've helped out, done something. This seems like a fairly innocuous thing. And now they're using this as a mechanism to go target private individuals off these loose associations. And look, this is not news, right? I mean, we have seen this throughout all of this. I talked about, Colleen Hoover had to turn off her Instagram. Jenny Slate had to turn off comments. America Ferrer had to turn off her comments, I believe. She took down her post endorsing Blake Lively and then put it back up, I think. I'm losing track, right? But everybody connected is getting targeted. The donut store that Blake Lively did a PR thing at, and they got targeted by trolls and review bombed, and then got the health inspectors called on them. And even though the health inspector came in and said, yep, no, it's fine, they're still dealing with people leaving abusive and negative reviews. Their whole Yelp page got shut down, all of this, right? This week also saw Blake Lively get named as one of the most influential people of 2025 as a Titan. And look, Time's clearly a puff piece, right? They've talked to certain people, and they just give off who they think. It's pure opinion, right? And Sherilyn Ifill, civil rights lawyer, doing really incredible work, with a lot of the issues that we're currently having. I think I'll put it as that. And looking at in particular the fight for immigrant rights that we're dealing with right now, right? Took time out to basically write a piece about Blake Lively and just say that, hey, off my 6-year friendship with her, she's somebody who I admire and have worked with, and she has a sincere kind of desire to learn and unpack and really be a champion for voices of other people. And I think that's great, right? It's nothing too serious or whatever. As a result of this, Sherilyn had to turn off her comments. She was getting harassed and hounded because of that. Let me just 1 second. I gotta go pull up my threads to show you, because I don't have the screenshot. I don't know why I didn't already kind of get that. But yeah, so she had to close off her Instagram comments because of all of the hate and abuse that she was getting, simply for offering a puff piece that kind of promoted and pushed her up. Anybody who is touched or connected to is getting attacked. Here we go. You're aware of Blake's face. How much did they pay you? You spoke on Blake who got married on a plantation. All bringing up this and kind of, I don't know what this would be, black-splaining, racism to a civil rights lawyer is wild to me. I think, this is somebody who absolutely made the calculations and knowledge of her endorsement of Lively, knowing who she was and is and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's strange to me that people feel the need to go after her in this way. But it's more concerning now, like I said, that it's going after individual people. And I think this is something we need to be very, very careful of, because it's not just people connected to Blake Lively, it's also creators now who are standing up for her. I don't just say this because I'm included in that. I do think, as somebody who is a creator and puts stuff out there, there's a certain amount of, like, if you are making content, you should expect to be criticized, right? There's not a great deal, as long as it's not attempting to dox you and like go after you and cause harm, I don't see an issue with openly and genuinely questioning my motives and the content I make. I have a huge problem when it's starting to be going after individuals. It's not just like this executive assistant. There's also people who are openly discussing, the people who are the private citizens who registered the original Vanzan corporations, the one in California and the one in Delaware that are now getting brought up and caught into this. And even just random commentators, people who are not creators, Redditors, users on Thread, are also now being attacked. I talked about Kat Ortega, who's a lawyer who speaks out, talks a lot of this stuff on Reddit. They've been mercilessly attacked and their credentials gone after, talking about who they are. One with MJ, same. And it's just getting, it seems to me it's getting very, very dangerous. The level of discourse and where we are at we're so far removed from actually talking about any of the facts of the case to now just destroying and attacking the reputation, motives, and character of anyone who dares to offer support for Blake Lively is super concerning. Because ultimately, again, this is coming from a place where we're motivated by not even necessarily caring so much about Justin Baldoni. That, hey, a performative male feminist, like chalk one up, right? Add another one to the scoreboard. And I get the irony of being in the space that I inhabit, right? Trust me, I know I've trusted a lot of these men. And over the last 3 years, that has been one of the heartbreaks of me, of trying to build community, trying to build that with other men. And there are probably 4, 5 men that I feel consistently good about talking about. There are so many more in that category of I can't. I've seen things that behaviors that may not necessarily be red flags, but are definitely yellow ones that I'm like, because so often do we see a Baldoni, somebody who claims to get it, claims to understand, and then the least bit of criticism comes their way and they absolutely lose it, right? I don't necessarily think it's a conversation about that. This is really about a conversation about standing up for victims and making sure that other victims who see all of this feel supported and feel like they have a space where they can have their voices come out. Say all of that to say a scenario in where like anybody who shows any support for Blake Lively becomes a target is super terrifying. It's scary. It's scary. It is hard by itself to have these conversations and talk about them, more so knowing that the internet is just waiting to go after you for it. Anyway, finish my rant. You get a little sermon on Sunday. All right, I will just go through chat and then we will wrap it up. They want Liz playing to be guilty of anything. Yes. And I think the only thing that Liz is quote, guilty of is just sitting and waiting and seeing, right? Like Liz clearly knew about some of this stuff earlier. And she probably struggled with it. I wonder if she had conversations with Justin about it and what those conversations looked like. I don't remember when Liz's last appearance on Man Enough was. Maybe that's something somebody could look at and see, knowing that there's like a delay between when they film them and release them, what roughly that that time period would be. Someone definitely saw that creators. Yep. Wait, is that the woman from the other lawsuit a couple of years ago? Possibly. I told you, I'm not gonna talk about them or whatever. I don't want to bring them up. They're just an internet creator. That's all we need to say. Turning to conspiracy theories is just one more step to the right, I guess. Yeah, and I mean, like, I really need to finish out my videos about like about the manipulation of the manosphere and how all of that works, because all of these tactics are all the same. Unfortunately, it's all the same stuff. Sherilyn literally references Blake learned and grew from her past. Yes. Meanwhile, right, compare that with the story of Baldoni, right, who in his book talked about, being very disparaging about a black woman being uncomfortable about throwing cotton at a wedding and not getting it. And then in the wake of George Floyd, learning and unpacking his racism and how like harmful the whole like, well, I don't see color kind of attitude has really been in just excusing kind of casual and subtle racism and often overt racism. But at the same time, he then gets sued. Wayfarer gets sued for racial discrimination. Like how much have you actually learned Like, from those George Floyd kind of conversations, when an employee is using that whole event to talk about that at work, and seeing that tension at work, and you dismiss him and he ends up suing. It doesn't seem like you've learned a lot. So yeah. A little knowledge is dangerous. These people know how to look up documents, but not what they mean. And I think it's just, this is what happens, right? And it's one of the reasons why when I try to make content, I take things a little slower and give time to look, because I think it's important, right, not to react, to respond. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of reacting, right? The moment a new piece of information drops, it's a bombshell, it's amazing, and everybody wants to be the first to report on it, the first to make content about it, because they get likes and views and attention. And like, that's great, but it's ultimately so damaging and harmful. Take a breath, stop, unpack it. Does this really matter in the scheme of things? And like looking at the Vanzan stuff, right? Is it really likely that Blake and Ryan bought a defunct California company name, revived it, and then reincorporated it in New York? Or is it more likely that they just incorporated a New York company in 2019, and for some reason those two records are getting confused up because they have the same name? Like, it ultimately doesn't matter, because it doesn't change anything either way. What they say is scary, how much they come after someone. Yep, even you. Yes. I mean, everyone. And we've seen this from the beginning, right? I mean, this was one of the reasons that we know so much about the smear campaign, and it's so obvious, is that even very small creators who weren't necessarily getting a lot of attention, who talked on this, would suddenly find their comments lit up. Oh my goodness, I've had more comments on this video than I've ever had on any other video. And it's not because my views are suddenly skyrocketing. It's simply because there's somebody out there who's looking for mentions, and as soon as they find content on this, they're using this to change the discourse and go after it. I mean, it's fairly obvious. It would be a different story if a small creator did a Blake Lively video that was like their biggest video they've ever done, got 10,000 views or whatever, and then they got a ton of comments. Well, that explains why you're getting noticed. But very small micro creators were finding themselves absolutely, overwhelmed in their comments. And the only way that's happening is somebody is intentionally going out and looking for that content, because it's not because those videos are suddenly blowing up and getting broader reach. So it's very obvious. And that's the thing, is when you're a creator, when you have 1,000 followers, or you have 300 followers, and you push out a video and you expect a couple of hundred views and maybe 2 or 3 comments, when you suddenly get, the same number of views but 300 comments, it's because somebody's actively seeking you out and looking for your content and sharing passing your content directly, saying, hey, you need to go comment on this. It's transparent. I don't know why you would think it's not. Anyway, so that's it for today. I appreciate you all for hanging out with me on a Sunday instead. If you have anything else you want me to talk about or want to see, let me know. Otherwise, we'll do this next week. Hopefully by then I will actually have the answer sheet done for the Jones versus Abel, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see which of those text messages they agree to and which, if any, they deny. So we'll see. Other than that, I don't remember if there's anything major going on this week, because everything's been played out on the Blake Lively side. Friedman's not going to amend. Will he now, in the wake of this whole subpoena stuff, now try to file an amendment and ask for leave to amend before the motion is dismissed? Unlikely. I don't know. We'll see. Or will he try to file some other sort of complaint and go after new claims against Blake Lively if he can find some? I don't know what those legal claims would be, but we'll find out. And then, we got a couple of weeks for seeing if Wallace files his motion to dismiss. So, all right. Have yourselves a great rest of your week. If you like what we're doing, comment and subscribe to the channel.